Good morning. I'd like to call to order the April MTA Board Meeting held jointly today with the Metro North Railroad and Long Island Railroad Committee, New York City Transit Committee, Bridges and Tunnels Committee, Finance Committee, Safety, and Capital Program Oversight Committee. We are conducting this meeting remotely via Zoom and conference call. Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 202.1, which has subsequently been extended, suspends the open meetings law requirements and suspends and accordingly any provisions in the MTA bylaws regarding public attendance at meetings, and board members participating and voting by phone are also suspended. We look forward to when we can resume holding in-person meetings when it's safe to do so. Now I'd like to ask our General Counsel, Tom Quigley, to do the official roll call for the record. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, I'll now do the official roll call in alphabetical order. When I call your name, please verbally indicate your presence, and please make sure that your microphone is not on mute. I see Chairman Foy is in attendance. Commissioner Albert.
Here.
Commissioner Barbas.
Present.
Commissioner Borelli.
Present.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Calisi.
Here.
Commissioner Cortez Vasquez.
Here.
Commissioner Fleischer.
Here.
Commissioner Glucksman.
Here.
Commissioner Herman.
Here.
Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Lacewell.
Here.
Commissioner Law.
Here.
Commissioner Lynn.
Here.
Commissioner Mack. Commissioner Mack. Commissioner Mahaltis.
Here.
Commissioner Mojica. Commissioner Mojica. Commissioner Samuelson.
Present.
Oh, thank you.
I'm here.
Commissioner Schwartz. Commissioner Schwartz. Commissioner Tessitore.
Here.
Commissioner Zuckerman.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Tom.
Did you log me in?
Yes, Commissioner Mack, thank you. Later in the meeting, agency presidents and staff will submit procurements and actions for a vote. Your presence at this meeting and silence at the time of a vote will be considered an affirmative vote for the record. If you would like to vote no or abstain, please state your name and your vote. We will now move into our virtual comment period. As in prior months, speakers were able to register on Monday and send in their comments.
Good morning. We have 19 members of the public registered to speak today. The first 30 minutes of public comment will be delivered at the board meeting, and the remainder will be posted online for the public and board members on Wednesday, April 21st. As a reminder, we ask that all public speakers adhere to the MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind our public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. Thank you for your patience and understanding throughout the virtual public comment session. Our first speaker is Rachel Foss.
Good morning. I'm Rachel Foss, the Senior Research Analyst for Reinvent Albany. We advocate for more transparent and accountable New York government, including for authorities like the MTA. First, it's time for the MTA to appoint its Traffic Mobility Review Board, TMRB, for the Central Business District Tolling Program. It's good news for the MTA in the region that the federal DOT has finally provided government advisory opinion from 2019. This means webcasting its meetings, not only for votes on recommendations, but all meetings required by law to instill greater public confidence. Second, as New York State returns to normalcy with various forms of reopening, it's time for the MTA to end unnecessary emergency processes and less transparent governance by conducting business in the open, accountable way called for in state law and the MTA's own bylaws. Public watchdogs like Reinvent Albany are again asking the MTA to hold separate committee meetings with additional public comment, a call echoed by members of the MTA board. Unfortunately, the MTA website announced a single monthly board meeting will be held through June 2021 without separate meetings. One truncated meeting deprives the public of more opportunities to provide comment and prevents MTA board members from hearing from a broader segment of the public, an essential part of meeting their fiduciary duty. We're also concerned the MTA is replacing previously public meetings with private board member briefings. New Yorkers are rightly tired of living under emergency rules. We expect our public institutions to operate under established laws and regular order. We believe it is long past time for the governor or legislature to end Emergency Order 168. This 2017 governor's order was issued in response to subway service meltdowns and has since been renewed 47 times. Enough is enough. EO 168 and the COVID-19 EO 202 both suspend important anti-corruption safeguards. Subway performance has rebounded and there's no justification for the MTA to be under two separate states of emergency.
Thank you for your
consideration.
remarks. Our next speaker is Felicia Park Rogers.
My name is Felicia Park Rogers. I am the Director of Regional Infrastructure Projects for Tri-State Transportation Campaign, one of our region's oldest transportation advocacy organizations. I would like to address a few topics today. First of all, I would like to applaud the MTA's collaboration with the New York Commission of Human Rights to develop and distribute a series of public art projects in support of the Asian American community of New York. The art is beautiful, thought-provoking, and impactful. We thank you for this effort and look forward to more public messages supporting the diversity and people of our city and region. Additionally, we call on our transit system's riders to not be passive bystanders in the event of witnessing anti-Asian discrimination or harassment. Please stand up and speak up in support of your fellow New Yorkers. Secondly, we are pleased with the decision from the federal government calling for environmental impact assessment as opposed to a complete EIS and examination of congestion pricing. It is our understanding that during the unnecessary slowdown of this project by the previous presidential administration, that the MTA was moving forward with preparations for the submission of said reports. We hope this work continues at full speed. Car congestion in New York City has now reached 95% of pre-COVID levels. New York City was recently found to be the most congested city in America. We cannot reach our emissions reductions goals or reduce the negative impacts of congestion on our city without moving congestion pricing forward quickly and expeditiously. We applaud your efforts in this matter. Lastly, Tri-State Transportation Campaign with other advocacy organizations in our city, including Reinvent Albany, PCAC, and the Riders Alliance for the last year to help secure more than $15 billion in emergency relief funding for the MTA. Thanks to Senator Schumer and our congressional delegation, these funds kept the MTA from falling off the fiscal cliff due to reduced ridership and reduced fares. One of the many lessons of COVID is that our transportation system is overly reliant on fares for funding. We need to have a diversified set of funding mechanisms, and this is one of the reasons we are so supportive of congestion pricing, which will bring the projected $1 billion a year to help fund transit. In addition,
Thank you for your remarks. Our next speaker is Jason Anthony.
Greetings, MTA board members. Jason Anthony here from the Congress of Essential Workers. I want to announce this morning the report that was published in the transit materials regarding the subway stations and bus routes. In particular, I want to bring to your attention the S40 bus that goes from St. George Terminal to the Amazon Fulfillment Center in the Bloomfield section of Staten Island. I was brought to my attention since 2018, this bus is overcrowded. Workers from the Amazon Fulfillment Center are packed like sardines, and especially now during COVID, there's lack of social distancing, and workers from that fulfillment center have been reported to test positive to COVID-19. And also, I want the MTA to investigate why they decided to suspend service to the main fulfillment center of Staten Island of Amazon during the March 30th event that I was in, instead of having the bus stop in front of the JFK fulfillment center of Amazon. So I want an explanation for that. And good news for the Long Island. And the Long Island Railroad is way ahead of Metro North. I want to see more from Metro North regarding innovation. So that's all I have to say for this one. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lisa Daglian.
Greetings. I'm Lisa Daglian, Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA PCAC. I'll give you my remarks on April 19th for the April 21st board meeting. Apologies if I've missed breaking news in the intervening days, but I say this to reinforce the importance of allowing speakers on the day of board meetings. I'll also take this opportunity to urge you to reinstate committee meetings where so much valuable information is shared, including the use of innovative technologies to make the region a better and greener place by advancing important climate goals. This work is especially important to tout as we celebrate Earth Week. We're very excited to be at the announcement in Oyster Bay of the product test agreement to retrofit LIRR M7s with battery power to allow them to run in diesel territory, providing new opportunities for a one-seat ride for tens of thousands of riders. This first in the nation test is yet another example of the railroad embracing modern technology to benefit commuters. It will be good for riders and for the planet. Similarly, the advances being made toward a fully electric bus fleet by the team at NYC Transit Bus is impressive, as are the partnerships they're forging as they work toward a cleaner future. Adequate funding remains a challenge, but we're committed to doing our part to advocate with you. Complementing these innovations is the green light for an environmental assessment to get moving on congestion pricing, which will not just fund building and rebuilding our transit system, will help improve air quality and reduce traffic and greenhouse gas emissions. We hope to hear much more about next steps, including when and where we can expect public meetings to be held, and when the TMRB will be appointed and under what criteria. We'd also like a firm commitment that their meetings will be held publicly. The end goal of cleaner air should begin with sunlight, the best disinfectant. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Matt Camper.
Good morning, MTA Board. My name is Matt Camper, and I am the Vice President of Passengers United. I have a couple of items to address this month. First of all, the news this past week on Monday regarding the Long Island Railroad wanting to do an initiative program to have battery-operated trains. I am in complete support of this. This, I do feel, as one of my other fellow public speakers said, will, I feel, reduce the environment. It will save the planet. And most of all, it will help people such as on the Oyster Bay branch, the Port Jefferson branch, be able to get one-seat rides to and from Penn Station, New York, which I think is such a great benefit to riders. And this will help riders. And I believe this will change the way that riders use the Long Island Railroad for years to come. I really commend LIRR President Phil Eng on this initiative. I wish the railroad the best of luck on this initiative. I really hope this is a huge success. This is such a great way to continue to lead the way in the industry. This is the first in North America, and I completely support that. Second of all, I want to address the new destination displays that were put in place last month. I absolutely loved it. The information that is put out there on the destination displays is going to be great for riders. It really is going to be able to make riders not have to use the train time app. They could just look at the signs at the stations, and, you know, this is another way that the railroad is leading the way. And, you know, I hope to see the railroad continue to do that. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is John Michno.
I cannot believe that in 2021, I have to make this speech. I'm looking at LIRR work projects where some riders are given alternative transportation while others are not. And it's more than just a coincidence that areas of mostly white people and higher incomes get offered busing, while diverse communities such as mine are forgotten. I'm talking about the busing for Babylon branch riders for PSCG line work on overnights last week, and this past weekend where buses were offered for Long Beach and Far Rockaway riders, and looking ahead, seeing 2 weekends in May where buses are offered for Far Rockaway riders. But Westbury, Mineola, we don't get any buses. We get left stranded, told to find our own way without any shuttle buses that connect with train service at Hicksville or Floral Park. And speaking of Hicksville, where homeless have taken over the station, creating hazards for riders and no MTA presence, but Babylon has full-time patrols and is kept safe just because your white friends from Wall Street live there. You're supposed to treat all riders equally and fairly, but that is clearly not happening. It may be 2021, but it feels as if I'm talking to a transit board prior to 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama. You do not represent us. In a state as diverse as New York, most of you are white and seem to snub your nose at communities that aren't of your kind, being treated differently just because of the demographics of the community we live in. Really, in 2021, I can't help that I was born with a disability and cannot afford to live in these enclaves you care so much about. And we cannot let you get away with this anymore. Me and the team at Passengers United will continue to speak up about this discrimination. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Vittorio Bugatti.
Good afternoon. I'm Vittorio Bugatti, leader and founder of the Express Bus Advocacy Group. I'm here to discuss two issues. Number one, poor, unreliable bus service citywide. And number two, our filthy express buses. Bus ridership has rebounded faster than subway ridership at almost 50%, yet the MTA continues to shaft bus riders, especially express bus commuters in subway deserts with the least transportation options. Seniors in our advocacy group have complained about having to cancel their doctor's appointments because of so many scheduled trips being left unfilled by the MTA. Essential workers who need the express buses to commute into Manhattan have to drive into the city because of unreliable bus service. Worst off for those who work at night. Lines like the BM2 that are supposed to provide overnight express bus service during the subway shutdown have seen roughly 80% of scheduled service canceled at times. This was the case recently where 10 out of the 12 overnight BM2 trips from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. were canceled. And this pattern of missing scheduled service has continued across the system where riders have to wait an hour or more at all times of the day. To all board members, bus commuters want to know when you're going to fill the roughly 357 bus operator positions that currently remain vacant while you receive billions of dollars in federal funding. And number two, cleaning. My background is of a filthy express bus that says clean me. So that's basically what we're talking about here. Our express buses are filthy. The MTA says it spent $250 million last year on cleaning. Clearly, bus riders were not recipients of those allocated funds. Mr. Cipriano, we need more cleaners hired to clean our buses citywide. That means mopping the floors with soap and water and cleaning the windows and seats, not just disinfecting. If our city is going to recover, we need a reliable, safe, and clean transit system, and that includes our buses. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Councilmember Idanis Rodriguez.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair Pafoy, all the leadership of the MTA. I know that it's difficult to be in the leadership position that you have right now to address all the need that we have related to our public transportation, and especially when the MTA need more funding to continue operating the trains and the buses. As you know, beside all my support to the men and women that run the MTA, I'm also here today to add my voices to support the plan presented by Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams that is calling for the 4 points that will improve safety in our train stations. And that involves a better coordination between the MTA, the state, and the city, not only to do the assessment on the number of police officers that we need in the stations, but also to bring experts on how to work with individuals that they're dealing with mental health, to bring social workers to the train stations, as also being sure that all the stations have the necessary camera that we need in order for the pedestrians, for the riders to feel safe. I do believe also that it is our responsibility to continue improving our buses. I'm happy to see how we're working along some buses at 181st right now. Hoy estamos aquí apoyando el plan del presidente del condado, Eric Adams, quien presentó 4 puntos que mejorarían la seguridad de las personas que usan los trenes en esta ciudad de Nueva York, y esperamos que la MTA asuma el plan presentado por el presidente del condado de Brooklyn, Eric Adams, y mi persona, que esperamos mejorar la seguridad. Gracias.
Our next speaker is CN.
Hello, members of the board. My concerns are about the rationing of e-Hel on-demand rides and the cap on the price of eHealth on demand rides for people with disabilities. So people who are blind are often taught by a mobility and orientation instructor on how to board a subway train, and it can be a very dangerous process. The blind person has to listen out for the subway train, then they use their cane and move it along the side of the stationary train, and they move their cane to either guess if there's a opening into the train or if they're between cars. This is why the eHealth on Demand program is so vital. There is not a safe way for a blind person who has no vision, who is not independent, to safely board a subway train. So this program needs to be protected. After all, we've heard on the news lately about MTA employees misusing overtime. So I think we need to focus on that than trying to use the eHealth on Demand program to save costs to the MTA budget. This is a very important program that definitely needs to be protected. I'm also concerned about the public comment period. In the old days, before the pandemic, people were able to be heard. Everyone was able to be heard. And now it's only 30 minutes of comments. If the online world is meant to mimic the offline world, I think there should be the same sort of protocol as in-person public comments used to be. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.
Our next speaker is Miriam Fisher.
Good afternoon. I'm Miriam Fisher. I'd like to talk about supporting return to the subway and accessibility. The cost of overnight cleaning, I've read, is about $300 million. That money could be used for about 7 new elevators at about $43 million per elevator. Last estimate of needed elevators is about 900. Remember how many stations are unserved and often need 2 elevators or more per station. Unnecessary hygiene theater. Science tells us that the virus is spread not as much by touch, but by air. Safety and social distancing and masks. Social distancing can be aided by less crowding, more trains and staff. I just read in the paper this morning about more staff cuts by the MTA. Masks. Never saw a mask monitor at any of the stations I've used or on the train, done at selective stations, not all stations. Good compliance, which I believe and read about, but see, is not the same as 100% total compliance. I've changed seats when someone next to me doesn't have a mask, when there are people talking without their mask, spreading their breath. I could be next to a super spreader. I suggest a program like equivalent to de Blasio proposed a city cleaning corps, hire unemployed, homeless teens, have as monitors. I haven't heard of $50 tickets enforcement that was promoted a few months ago. Massive PR for 100% compliance will help return riders to the subway who fear the virus spread. I also speak as a personal subway rider in Chelsea, West 23rd.
Thank you for your remarks. Our next speaker is Alita Dupree.
Thank you, Chair Pat Foy and members. Alita Dupree for the record. My pronouns are she and her. Always good to be back with you. First, I was looking at the accessibility page on the website, and so thank you for doing some locational information on accessibility where it shows that I can find the elevators and bus and train connections. That'll be very helpful because ADA work includes everybody, includes me. So let's keep this going and do more ADA stations. Hopefully 50 of them a year will get this done. I hope to be back on the system soon. And I hope we can get an Omni fare card and fare app out. In the Bay Area of California, they just turned on the Clipper app because I don't want another damaged MetroCard story. And I'm thinking about just using my contactless card or phone to pay, but it would cost me more than my reduced fare MetroCard. So I think we have to accelerate that. I'm intrigued about this battery-powered test. I hope we can do it. and succeed, because I think we should have a subway and a railroad and bus system that runs on renewable energy. BART actually has a power content label. So I hope that the subway and Grand Central Terminal and the railroads will publish a power content label showing that we are operating 100% on renewable energy. And most of all, I want this system to be safe. I grew up on this system, and I want to be able to enjoy the system fully as anyone else does, and safety must come first. So you can't beat the subway for getting around. It's a lot less expensive than me using cars or ride shares, etc. So I hope by the time that we have another meeting, I will be back on the system. A system steeped in tradition and legend and history, not just necessary, but can be fun as well. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Andy Pollock.
All right. Good morning, Chairman Foy, members of the board. I'm Andy Pollock, Regional Director of Passengers United. So a couple things that I would like to discuss today. Number one, I'm very pleased to hear the announcement back on Monday regarding the Long Island Railroad experimenting with battery-powered trains. It's a good first step towards trying to help electrify other branches of the Long Island Railroad. So let's keep that up. My main point I want to discuss about the Long Island Railroad is the substitute busing situation. If you refer to page 122 of this month's committee book, you will see that there's going to be 2 weekends coming up of the main line being shut down again on the weekends of April 25th and the 26th and May 1st and May 2nd. I feel that it is inappropriate that you are making passengers take Nice Bus, which does not run 24 hours a day. That's completely ridiculous. And then making passengers go to Roosevelt Field Mall and waste more time. You can easily run a bus on Old Country Road. It's a simple request, just making passengers go between Mineola and Hicksville for a start. We'll look at Carl Place in Westbury another time, but let's experiment with that. And lastly, I want to discuss New York City Transit. I have some good things to say for Sarah Feinberg this month. I'm very thankful that the C and F line service is increasing. That's very important because more riders are coming back. And especially 2 million subway riders. Let's keep that ridership number going up. Same with Craig Cipriano. Congratulations in the bus division with 1 million riders. So with that, thank you all very much, and I expect to be speaking to you all again before Memorial Day.
Our next speaker is Stuart Mader.
More than 450 transit agencies in 45 states provide free transit to vaccines to help their communities build immunity to COVID-19 as they rebuild ridership. But the agencies in the New York City region are not yet part of this movement, even though transit use here is 6 times higher than anywhere else in the country. So why is Vax Transit necessary? Simply put, Black and Latino people in New York and New Jersey aren't getting enough vaccines. Together, they're 35% of New York's population, and they've suffered 41% of COVID-19 deaths, but have received just 23% of vaccines. Free Vax Transit is critical to closing this gap because communities of color make up a majority of transit riders nationally at 60%, and at 24%, Black Americans are the single largest community of color using transit. So how does Vax Transit work? Jacksonville Transportation Authority, Houston Metro, Sound Transit, and hundreds of other agencies simply require customers to show proof of appointment on the day they ride free to get their shot. Greater Cleveland RTA provides day passes. A customer can display their pass to a driver when boarding a bus or regional train and use it to pass through fare gates for subways. Greater Dayton RTA surveyed riders and reports that they've gained new riders who hadn't previously used their system as a direct result of providing Vax Transit. More examples are available at stuartmader.com/VaxTransit. So how can agencies afford free Vax Transit? Federal COVID-19 relief funding can be used to provide free rides. The Federal Transit Administration has designated $8.4 billion in American Rescue Plan relief funding for transit to the New York City metro area. Maria Fernandez, FTA Deputy Administrator, recently confirmed that FTA funding programs can be used to set up and operate vaccination sites at transit facilities and support transportation to and from vaccination sites. Much of the work to improve transit takes time, investment, and relentless advocacy, but every so often the opportunity arises to immediately improve people's lives. Join more than 450 of your peers nationwide and offer free Vax Transit for the next few months. Get shots in arms, beat the virus, and build ridership. Thank you.
Our next speaker is H.P. Schroer.
I am HP, a World War II veteran and director of UMIWI, an organization representing 12,000 veterans attending college in New York City. For the last 4 years, we have requested this board to enable veterans to purchase MTA fares at the same price as seniors and have been turned down because of financial restraints. Pat, I want to thank you and the others on the board for your encouragement not to give up. We heard you and took action. 3 years ago, the mayor and New York City Council agreed to provide you with the money to enable veterans attending college in the city to purchase fares at half price. Unfortunately, less than 400 of the 12,000 eligible got the discount. Why? Because the mayor changed the eligibility requirements. I asked the mayor representatives on the board to explain why this was done and if it will be corrected, especially since the government has just given you and the MTA extra billions of dollars to help you with your finances. For those representatives of the governor, you too have received additional federal money. Yet 2 bills which allow all veterans to purchase MTA fares at half price have not been put up for a vote, in spite of the support of a majority of the legislators. I ask you why. And Pat, I ask you, on behalf of my fellow veterans, will you announce on Memorial Day that all veterans will be able to purchase MTA fares at half price? And if not, when will you? I thank you.
Our next speaker is Elon Berman.
We need to talk about so many situations regarding public transportation in New York. The crime on the New York City subway is atrocious. There are trash cans exploding everywhere. There are people being pushed in front of oncoming subway trains, left, middle, and right. Just a day ago, I read that there was a guy with an AK-47 rifle at Times Square subway station. And there are Black people and Asians and so many other people getting harassed and beaten up and killed everywhere on the New York City subway. And it is driving the ridership down because everybody is just feeling unsafe, even waiting for 1 minute for a New York City subway in New York. They should not have to look left and right in fear to see if somebody unexpectedly assaults them. New York City subways are in desperate need of police officers. And switching topics, we also need police officers to walk around the clock in circles on buses, subways, and trains to see if everybody on board has their masks on and masks on correctly. If they have no mask at all, throw them off. If they are not covering their nose, ask them to cover their nose. If they refuse, throw them off. The masks must be taken seriously on the New York buses, trains, and subways, since we are all at a do-or-die situation. Next thing I will talk about is we need a lot more transportation in New York. The cars in New York are taking up the roads and it is spreading unnecessary pollution to the New York air and is destroying the environment. What must happen is that the Long Island Railroad M3s must come back in passenger service. They may be old, but they are useful. There was 175 M3s in service before the pandemic. If we bring them back in service, that is 175 cars we can take off the New York roads. New York needs more transportation. If the R32 subways and the R42 subways are able to survive for 60 years, so should the Long Island Railroad M3s. Also, if there's a shutdown on the Long Island Railroad on any branch,
Thank you so much for your remarks. Our next speaker is Omar Vera.
Good morning, or should I say good afternoon, everyone. Here, welcome to the April edition of the virtual MTA board meeting. I'd like to discuss a couple things first. First of all, I think it is time for the MTA to consider renaming the Bronx Whitestone Bridge after an outstanding member of Congress who went out of her way to improve life for everyone. I urge the MTA to rename the Whitestone Bridge the AOC Bridge after the amazing Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She went out and beyond to help with the relief efforts in Texas in the aftermath of their ice storm earlier this year. even when she was being mocked by that state's junior U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, who fled the state to go to Cancun, Mexico, with his family. So, yeah, that's another discussion. Anyway, second, as much as the buses on the subway, the announcements from all these prominent New York celebrities are quite useful, I think it's time the MTA ought to tone it down a little bit, considering like it doesn't make sense for me to go every single time going to a bus to hear an announcement on respect the line, or wearing a mask also will protect you from anyone who you do not want to see on the bus. I mean, the latter isn't always true, but let's cut the repetition down a bit. All right, so apologize to Rachel Faust for simply pointing out a conflict of interest regarding Joe Lota back in 2018. His answer was out of line. She was being polite. She was being nice, simply pointing out a fact, and that was the furthest thing from character assassination, pointing out a factual conflict of interest, considering Mr. Lota later left the MTA months later because precisely this thing. So we need more accountability, and we're not even going to get started with right now with the current scandals facing the.
Thank you for your remarks. Our next speaker is Charlton D'Souza.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Charlton D'Souza, and I'm the president of Passengers United. Yet again, I got bumped by the MTA, and this is getting ridiculous. And this is to Pat Foy. Pat Foy and the MTA board. Public speakers should be allowed to speak first, and elected officials should be, they should have a separate time for speaking. It's not fair. And this 30-minute rule where only 15 to 16 speakers can speak is getting a bit ridiculous now. New Jersey Transit allows people to call in live on a telephone, and they actually let all the public speakers speak, no matter how long it takes. The MTA board has to let people speak, and directors of organizations who are actually on the ground doing grassroots work should be given priority. But this whole 30-minute thing is ridiculous. And for the other public speakers on here, there's too many public speakers who don't even live in New York State coming on here. And there's too many public speakers selling things and things like that. It's getting a bit ridiculous. And we definitely at Passengers United are going to file a lawsuit against the MTA. And Rachel Foss, if you're listening, you need to also speak up for this, as well as all the other advocates, because it's not fair. 15 speakers, 30 minutes, no. Everyone should be allowed to speak, and their testimony should be put on the MTA Live portal. And also with the Hollis station, the Hollis LIRR station is in a state of disrepair. It's one of the worst stations in the MTA system. The entire station needs to be rebuilt. The wooden platform is shaking. People are falling down. There was reports that a pregnant lady fell down the steps at Hollis. What is going on? The MTA just got all these billions of dollars, and now I'm finding out that the Hollis Long Island Railroad platform and station is being taken off the capital programs list. No, it needs to be completely rebuilt. And thank you. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, this concludes our public comment.
Thank you, and thank all of our public speakers. I begin today acknowledging how important the events in Minnesota were yesterday, as the jury charged with deliberating the case in the murder of George Floyd delivered some measure of accountability. To be clear, this is not the full measure of justice Mr. Floyd's family deserved, but is an important step forward. The murder of Mr. Floyd last year was a watershed event for this country, as it surfaced and laid bare dynamics that have existed unacknowledged for far too long. The racism and inequity that still exists in America, and the tremendous consequences that can mean for our citizens. As Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. We as a nation, as a society, still have far to go, but the events of yesterday have helped us move one step closer. As we move forward at the MTA, we recognize and embrace the value and importance of diversity within our region, and will continue to drive towards effective change on these issues. We'll now today have a moment of reflection to acknowledge those in the MTA family who have passed since our last meeting. We recognize and honor their service and memory today and every day. Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is with a heavy heart that we recognize the passing of 3 members of our bus's family. Michael Chambers, Dennis Robinson, Mary Wallace. Our thoughts and prayers are with their families and loved ones. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Craig. Kathy.
On March 17th, Metro North lost another family member to COVID-19. Brendan Quinn was only 33 years old. He was a member of the transportation team as a conductor. He had joined Metro North in January of 2015. Brendan was a true gentleman and he excelled at what he did. He was kind and courteous to all he came in contact with, extremely professional in the performance of his duties, and was just a great conductor who provided safe and reliable service to our customers every time he set foot on a train. Brendan was a loving and caring husband and the father of 2 beautiful young girls. He was an active and respected member of his community and a good person who was a friend to all. Brendan will be greatly missed. Please keep him and keep his family and his loved ones in your thoughts and prayers during this very difficult time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Kathy. Jano.
MTA C&D is mourning the loss of one of our colleagues, Yunin Demian, who passed away on April 12th. Yunin was a transit management analyst on the C&D delivery infrastructure team. And he was an MTA veteran for 15 years and is remembered by everybody as an incredibly loving and warm-hearted colleague. He leaves behind his wife of 26 years, Nabila Demian, a veterinarian, and 3 children. Many members of the C&D team were able, thanks to the vaccination, the progress of vaccination, to actually attend Yunin's funeral, and we wish comfort to his family.
Thanks, Jano. I now ask all of us to please join in a moment of silence for our fallen colleagues. We thank all our heroic employees for their continued dedication. It's only because of their hard work that the MTA has been able to pull the region through this unprecedented crisis, and we are here for them and their loved ones. To that end, I'm pleased to share that the MTA is extending our first-in-the-nation family benefits agreement for the families of our fallen colleagues. Simply put, it is the right thing to do. It's imperative that we continue to take care of these families who have suffered such tremendous losses due to the pandemic. The sacrifice of their loved ones deserves to be recognized. These benefits include $500,000 from the MTA to the surviving family of any employee who succumbed to COVID-19. The agreement also provides health insurance to the worker's spouse and dependents to the age of 26 for 3 years. Importantly, the final state budget this year also included a provision to make the $500,000 benefit exempt from state taxes. We thank the governor for ensuring this exemption was included in the enacted state budget and the legislature for approving it. We hope the federal government will soon follow suit. Tom.
Thank you. I just wanted to do a second call of the roll call for those who didn't respond earlier. Commissioner Schwartz?
Here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Chairman, we have 100% attendance.
Thank you, Tom. Now a word on our Earth Day, which, as you know, is tomorrow. As we emerge from the COVID-19 crisis, we must return our focus on the literal existential crisis of our time, the ongoing climate crisis. It's critical that we emerge from this moment a greener and more sustainable New York. Earth Day serves as an important reminder of the powerful role the MTA plays in making New York a more livable place for all New Yorkers. Let me make 5 brief points on this issue. First, the transportation sector around the nation is a significant contributor to greenhouse gases. That, however, is not the case with respect to the MTA's transit system. In 2019, the MTA effectively prevented the release of approximately 17 million metric tons of greenhouse gases. I have a hard time envisioning 17 million metric tons of schmutz, and you might as well. But to size it for us, that is 3 times the entire annual greenhouse gas emissions in the city of San Francisco. That's extraordinary. And a bonus fact, an average MTA trip avoids over 10 pounds of greenhouse gas emissions. We're committed to doing more in the years ahead by transitioning away from diesel on our buses and trains. Second, the MTA is continuing to drive towards creativity and innovation and technology to achieve these goals. Earlier this week, Phil Eng announced that the Long Island Railroad is now testing battery-powered cars on the Oyster Bay branch, the first test of this technology in North America. If this test with Alstom proceeds successfully, air quality on Long Island would improve, commutes would be shorter and more reliable, and literally billions of dollars of required capital investment in electric infrastructure would be available to reinvest in other priority projects. And if the pilot proves successful, the Long Island Railroad could eventually retire our noisy diesel trains completely. Phil has been sharing this great news about this pilot over the past few days, and we'll speak about it more this morning. And if it's successful, this technology could benefit Long Island Railroad and Metro-North customers, and frankly, other commuter rails around the nation. Third, innovation and policy. One of the most important ways the MTA will help improve the environment of this region is through our first-in-the-nation Central Business District tolling program. The CBDT program, once implemented, will fund mass transit. 30% of the capital plan is dependent on CBDT, and reduce congestion in New York City and beyond. Additionally, the program will help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve air quality. Allison DiSereno, Deputy Chief Operating Officer and our agency's lead on this project, will provide an update shortly. We do want to thank Transportation Secretary Buttigieg for the quick action on this matter, giving us direction as to the environmental approach, and recognize the importance of prioritizing this project just 2 months into the administration. Fourth, the 2020 to 24 capital plan invests in environmentally friendly projects across the board, including the largest electric bus order in the history of the United States, a major step towards an all-electric bus fleet in the future, more efficient rolling stock, ADA accessibility, additional bus lanes which increase bus speeds and reduce idling, and many more. I'll note that the MTA has received the Governor's Award for Outstanding Commitment to Energy Efficiency from NYPA for leadership in advancing clean energy projects. Finally, innovation and finance. The MTA was the first agency and is by far the largest municipal issuer of green bonds in the United States. At Governor Cuomo's suggestion in 2015, we began to explore the green debt market, selecting the nonprofit Climate Bonds Initiative for their global focus on climate issues. In just 4 years, the MTA has issued all of the bonds eligible under the Climate Bonds Initiative verification. And according to an independent analysis of our 2010 to 2014 capital program by the firm Sustainalytics, $11.4 billion of that program fully met CBI's low-carbon transport criteria. We're in the middle of procuring a new verification of the 2015 to 2019 capital program. This is done when the capital program is completed to continue those efforts. This commitment to green bonds is not new for the MTA, but is one the financial markets are increasingly realizing how important. Yesterday, the muni debt markets rejected a proposed deal in another part of the country for a private prison complex for not meeting ESG goals. Increasingly, investors in all markets will be looking at the social value of municipal debt and the importance of environmental, social, and corporate governance, or ESG goals. MTA municipal debt satisfies that need. Kudos to Bob Ferran, Pat McCoy, and their colleagues for advancing this. Now a word on the region's reopening. Our heroic employees continue to demonstrate day after day what it means to be an essential worker. Their critical work is vitally important as the city and region begin to reopen. It feels like real progress and hope are finally on the horizon. Vaccines are now available to all adults nationwide, thanks to President Biden. Employers are starting to have their workers return to the office. Restaurants and bars are staying open later. Museums and cultural centers are once again welcoming patrons. And fans are back in the stands at Citi Field and Yankee Stadium and other arenas enjoying live sports. We know reliable and efficient public transportation will play a key role in this comeback. New Yorkers know that mass transit is still the quickest and safest way to get around town, and many are now coming back to the system for the first time. On April 8th, Sarah Feinberg announced that the subways surpassed 2 million daily customers for the first time since the inception of the pandemic. Buses have regularly carried more than 1 million customers since last year, and Long Island Railroad and Metro-North have also shown modest increases. We'll continue to monitor and report service levels and adjust as necessary to accommodate returning riders. I strongly believe it's a matter of when, not if, more New Yorkers will follow suit. To help spur this return this spring, we're launching an exciting new Take the Train campaign. Opening day at Citi Field was our official kickoff. The MTA held the first ever live news conference on not one, but 2 moving trains. I raced Phil Eng to Citi Field to see whether the subway or Long Island Railroad was quicker. It's been reported that I lost, but the Mets won. And it was still a great experience, especially as a longtime Mets fan. It really heightened the optimism so many are feeling about the summer ahead and the 7 and 5 Mets. We're also grateful for the support we've received from all of New York's hometown sports teams recently as the fans have returned to arenas, the Mets, the Yankees, the New York Knicks, and the Brooklyn Nets. Nets star Joe Harris recorded this special message for our employees.
Hi, this is Joe Harris, and on behalf of the Brooklyn Nets, thank you to all the MTA workers for keeping our city going through this tough time. Your tireless work to keep our trains clean and running has not gone unnoticed. Without you, people wouldn't be able to get to work, to buy groceries, or to see Nets games. We are grateful for you.
Thanks, Joe, for taking the time to give a shout out to the incredible men and women of the MTA. We, of course, fully concur. Let's talk about safety. At this critical moment, continuing to assure a safe and secure environment system-wide remains our top priority. Last week, we released our latest transit customer survey, which found that 3/4 of respondents listed safety from crime and harassment in stations and on trains as their number one concern when considering a return to transit. More than 3/4 of our riders also said they feel safer or much safer in the presence of uniformed police officers. We hear them loud and clear, which is why Sarah Feinberg and I have been continually calling on the city to allocate additional NYPD officers to the transit beat, along with additional resources to support people experiencing mental health crises who have nowhere to turn for shelter. Too often we encounter people who need help that our transit workers simply cannot and should not provide, which is why we need city resources to protect these most vulnerable citizens. For the MTA's part, we plan to stay the course when it comes to executing our unprecedented disinfecting regime and promoting the system-wide mask mandate. The latest numbers show mask usage continuing to hover around 98 to 99%. I thank our customers for doing their part to stop the spread of COVID-19. As you know, masks are available for free at all our stations, and a number of us, including me, will be handing some out personally tomorrow with the mask force in my old neighborhood of Jackson Heights, the 74th Street and Roosevelt Station, and at Grand Central with Kathy Rinaldi and Metroman. Efforts to vaccinate the MTA workforce are also progressing. 40% of our employees to date have received at least their first shot, and we're working hard to drive that number even higher. We've opened the MTA-only vaccination sites at Livingston Street in Brooklyn, Grand Central Terminal, and in Jamaica. Slots have also been set aside for MTA workers at the state-run Jacob Javits Center. Finally, I'd like to recognize and congratulate 2 former colleagues. First, congratulations to newly confirmed Deputy Transportation Secretary Polly Trottenberg. Throughout her years of service in city government and as a MTA board member and serving 2 United States senators, Polly proved herself to be a talented and skilled advocate for New Yorkers time and time again. I'm confident she will bring the same brilliant insights, work ethic, and clear-eyed focus to USDOT when crafting national transit policy, advancing the interests of the nation, including those of New York. Congratulations also to former MTA Chief Operating Officer Nuria Fernandez, who was nominated this month by the President to serve as Administrator of the Federal Transit Administration. Nuria is uniquely qualified for this important role as she serves as the FTA's current Deputy Administrator. Nuria led the agency in an acting capacity under former President Bill Clinton. It's clear the FTA will be in good hands with Nuria at the helm. Finally, I'd like to recognize the upcoming retirement of Al Petray, Executive Director of the Omni Program and Chief Revenue Officer at New York City Transit. Throughout Al's tenure here, he has consistently provided leadership, vision, and excellence in operations. His energy and focus has helped us solve problems creatively and with classic Al Petray panache. Al, congratulations, you'll be missed. And with that, I'll turn it to Pat Warren.
Thank you, Chairman. As is always the case, the safety and security of our employees and customers remains paramount. Agency safety statistics, as well as information regarding the organizational changes to the safety and security offices, can be found in the Safety Committee book on pages 6 through 17. Regarding COVID-19, the number of COVID-19 cases in New York City and within MTA have been steadily dropping over the last month. Currently, the city's positivity rate for infection hovers above 3%. MTA's rate is 1.4%, and we currently average 21 new cases per day over a 7-day period. We continue our on-site diagnostic testing program together with aggressive contact tracing efforts. Our workforce availability remains strong. Hence, operations remained largely unaffected by workforce availability. To date, we have conducted over 40,000 diagnostic tests. Pursuing the vaccination of our workforce remains our major priority effort. Our workforce continues to take advantage of growing numbers of city, state, county vaccination sites, as well as the 3 MTA sites. Our sites are run with the support of mobile health. As of today, nearly 28,000 of our 70,000 person workforce have been vaccinated, and as the chairman just said, that equates to about 40% of our population and reflects the trend of New York. We highly encourage everyone to pursue vaccination for all of our safety. As is our standard, we continue the many protocols previously established to protect our employees and customers, to include the distribution of millions and millions of masks and other PPE. Further, we continue our daily cleaning and disinfecting of stations, trains, buses, paratransit vehicles, and employee workspaces, as well as continue our advanced air filtration enhancements in our facilities, trains, and buses. Together with social distancing, mask usage remains a critical defense against contracting and spreading the virus, according to the CDC. Mask usage for our riders remains high. Our most recent surveys, as was just mentioned, show us in the high 90% range on our buses and subways and trains. And we thank all of our ridership for their support and respect shown to one another. Now, let me transition to the topic of security. You heard the chairman just comment that MTA's recent customer survey shows a significant decrease in the perception of security within the subway system. We take our customers' concerns very seriously and are endeavoring to take actions that will not only improve security, but also improve our customers' feeling or perception of security throughout the MTA system. The significant increase in felony and misdemeanor assaults in our system this year are unacceptable and contribute to the sense of insecurity. Further, panhandling, open illegal drug activities, vandalism, and other visible violations of MTA rules contribute to the impression of insecurity. None of these activities are new to New York City or to the MTA's transportation system, but the vulnerability presented to riders who arrive at largely empty stations and trains at certain times of the day due to the dramatic reduction in ridership heighten the feeling of insecurity. We recognize these challenges and are taking actions, some of which include the continued significant increase of placement of CCTV cameras. Of note, the NYPD's Transit Bureau, led by Chief O'Reilly, and the MTA PD have really taken advantage of these video systems and have made significant and numerous arrests in recent weeks due to this. It's been great police work by both these agencies in leveraging these systems. The MTA asked the city to place more officers into the subway system to provide a visible and tangible security presence. To date, 644 officers were added, and I suspect that many of you who travel in the subway have seen them in your travels. That said, we continue to see a need and ask for more police presence. Again, under Chief O'Reilly's leadership, her officers are more visible and actively policing to levels not witnessed in recent years. Really great and appreciated work. The recent federal actions to provide relief funding to the MTA enable us to resume the hiring of police officers to bring the MTA PD up to full strength. These officers make possible an increased presence throughout our entire system, which range from Connecticut to Manhattan on to the northeast tip of Long Island. In coordination with with the city, the MTA strategically deploys its police officers to security hotspots within the system to reinforce policing efforts. The MTA has asked the city for more homeless outreach services to deliver care to those in need. We continue to partner with the city and provide feedback as to where these resources are most needed. Further, we continue aggressive cleaning of stations, buses, and train cars, which provides a visible sense of order and contributes to the sense of security. These efforts are important, and we recognize we need to continue to do more to protect our employees and our riders and encourage customers back to the MTA and support New York City's recovery. We are grateful for the patronage of our customers and are committed to continuing to bring the safest ground transportation to New York. Next, you will hear from MTA's Chief of Police, Joe McGran, followed by New York PD's Transit Bureau Chief, Catherine O'Reilly. They will go over statistics regarding some of the major index crimes as they relate to the subway system and to the MTA as a whole. Chief McGran will further highlight some of the employee and customer quality of life concerns, including employee harassment, assaults, and vandalism. With that, Chief McGran, you're up.
Good morning. Overall crime on the commuter rails was up 5 crimes in the month of March, 13 crimes this year versus 8 the same period last year. Year to date, however, serious crimes remain down, 29 crimes this year versus 36 last year. The Long Island Railroad experienced a rise of 3 crimes in March, 8 versus 5, while Metro North had an additional 2 crimes, 5 versus 3. There were, however, 501 incidents of vandalism throughout the MTA system in the first quarter of 2021, including 242 graffiti hits, 62 video screens damaged, and 19 MetroCard machines also damaged. This averages out to about 167 incidents per month in the first part of this year, compared to an average of 202 incidents since last September when we started keeping statistics regarding these separate incidents. There were 457 employee harassment incidents in the first quarter of 2021, or an average of 152 per month, versus an average of 150 harassments since last September. And there were 124 employee assaults in the first quarter for an average of 41 per month versus an average of 44 per month since last September. As far as trespassing, there was an average of 129 incidents of trespassing in the first 3 months of this year versus an average of 122 incidents since last September. But on a separate note, I'm pleased to mention that we have hired 48 new recruits just this morning, bringing our total to 953 officers, which is above our old head count of 789 on our march to 1,300 total. In addition, our body camera pilot program is almost complete. We are 2 months into a 90-day pilot program, and we are looking to deploy more of these body cameras in the coming months as soon as we can get a contract signed with the vendor. So far, the response to these body cameras has been positive, both by our officers and by the local DAs that we deal with. We've had to provide some body camera footage to local district attorney's office to clarify the charges that we were bringing against some arrested suspects. And for the most part, we find these body cameras most helpful to our officers in exonerating them in situations where there's a complaint lodged against them. And that's my report for now, sir.
Thanks, Chief McGran. Let me pass the microphone over to Chief O'Reilly.
Good morning, everyone. During the month of March, total felonies in the subway system were down 32%, with 57 fewer incidents than during the same period last year. Robberies were down 31%, grand larcenies are down 54%, and there were 10 additional felony assaults for the month of March. Crime is down significantly year to date, with 114 fewer robberies and 275 fewer grand larcenies. There were 9 additional felony assaults this year versus last year. With all categories combined, crime in our subways is down 53% year to date, with 379 fewer crimes through the end of March. In fact, last week we saw the second lowest week for transit crime ever recorded, with only 15 reported crimes, even as ridership has steadily climbed to more than 6 times that at the lowest point in the pandemic. To frame that a different way, crime not only declined as ridership fell during the pandemic, but has continued to fall as ridership has risen from around 300,000 daily riders to over 2 million. As daily ridership heads into the millions once again, we are confident we have the necessary number of officers deployed to keep the system safe. What will hinder rider confidence is continued fear-mongering. It's a disservice to New Yorkers to advance a narrative that crime is soaring in the subways, when it's simply not the case. Crime is at record lows in almost every category, and we have every interest in driving it even lower. I would ask the MTA leadership and the members of this board to take meaningful steps to increase safety and public confidence. This includes prioritizing the installation of cameras in every station and aboard every train. Video technology has substantial investigative value and has played a critical role in countless investigations. Naturally, I will not go into too much detail for security reasons, but we all know that far too many areas within our subways are still without the benefit of video technology. The pace of the installation effort must be ramped up, and the security cameras should be a top priority for the MTA moving forward. That concludes my crime update, and I thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Pat Warren, Chief O'Reilly, or Chief McGran?
Yeah, I do.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Yeah. To both commissioners, you just read off a bunch of crime statistics, but the question I have for you is, for most of 2020 and also going into now 2021, we've been living in a COVID pandemic world where ridership has gone down tremendously. Obviously, it's starting to come back now in 2021, but ridership compared to 2019 is still significantly lower in 2021 than it was in 19, and clearly it was much, much lower in 2020. So when you compare the level of ridership pre-pandemic versus the level of ridership in the pandemic, how did the statistics match up for you to tell the board whether or not crime has really gone down, if every category of crime has gone down based on a ridership basis, not just based on a pure statistical basis? That's my first question.
So I'd like to answer that. You know, we have to look at the reality of the situation. Crime has continually been reduced, and it continues to go down as the ridership is increasing.
You know, I don't think that's really an answer, Chief. I mean, my thing is, if there's 1 million passengers riding the trains today versus 5 million passengers riding the train in 2019, saying that crime has gone down, it's because there's fewer people riding the subway. I want to understand on an apples to apples comparison, okay, whether or not crime is really down, and if crime is down in every category, okay? So if you don't have the answer for today, that's fine. We can wait to get the answer. But we need to have apples to apples comparison. The other question I have is, does the NYPD CompStat the New York City transit system, like you CompStat other areas of the NYPD? So you're looking at the system as a whole and see where there are problems and issues and put together a plan to address those crime issues.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We do that. We look at low-level crimes. We look at misdemeanor crimes. All indicators are crime is down in the subway system.
And is the MTA police and is the New York City Transit aware of these CompStat meetings and what's discussed and what comes out of those CompStat conversations regarding this city transit system?
Absolutely. Chief McGran knows very well about our CompStat meetings.
And the other thing is, you mentioned that we need to do more with respect to cameras. You talk about cameras in a subway train. I don't know how easy it is after a subway car is built to install a camera in a subway train. Certainly, if you know of technology that is effective, I would love to hear what technology the NYPD would be effective in fighting crime and making the system safer. My understanding is we've added a lot of cameras. I've been very focused on the issue of cameras in our transit system, both in our stations, as well as anywhere else. And I've, in the past, have suggested to Pat Warren, who's been involved in these meetings and conversations. I've talked to Sarah Feinberg. I've talked to the Metro MTA police to include the NYPD in getting your input. But, I find it a little curious. You're stating that we're not, as an agency, adding more cameras. My understanding from Transit President Feinberg, we have added a lot of cameras on our stations. But if you think haven't done enough, including stations and trains, then I would love to get a plan from you and your team on what you believe needs to be done from a camera standpoint. And I'd also like to see a plan or better understand, we don't have to do this in public because obviously it's probably part of your criminal strategy, on seeing a greater presence of NYPD actually on the trains, because I ride the trains. And while I do see the NYPD in our stations, not as often as I'd like, but I do see them. I never see them on our trains. So I think there needs to be a combination of taking multiple tactics in how we approach fighting crime and raising the level of public confidence that the system is safe. So I'd be happy to talk to you offline and you can explain to me and anybody else that's interested, what the plans are, how you go about assigning police officers to actually ride the trains. But I also would like to get a plan from you on how you would deploy cameras and what technology you would recommend that the MTA use in order to provide this added tool on you fighting crime.
Well, quite frankly, Larry, I think that plan should be put together by Chief McGran and the MTA police.
Well, you can help. I mean, you're the one that made the statement that we should have cameras in the subways, cars, and this platform. So why wouldn't you want to be?
I'd be more than willing to help Joe McGran put that plan together.
Great, terrific.
Kathy and I have an excellent relationship, and we will certainly put our heads together and come up with an adequate plan for you.
Great.
Well, there is a plan out there, Chief, and I'd like to have that plan dusted off that I worked with Pat Warren on probably 2 years ago, and then see what happened to that plan, and then what we've done and what the New York City Transit President has done since then, and figure out how to embellish it. Because what I'm prepared to do, and I've said this publicly, is I will amend the capital budget to provide the funds necessary, to put in the technology necessary to increase the safety of our transit system and our ridership and our employees that work day in and day out, whether it's a commuter rail system or it's the New York City subway system. I mean, I don't understand if we've had vandalism also go up on our metro commuter rail systems. Are there cameras there monitoring and seeing the vandalism? If there are not cameras there, there should be cameras there. If there are cameras there, we should be tracking the days and the time of day when these vandalisms are occurring. And then we should have a police strategy on how to stop it. Now, whether or not that's happening or not, I don't know. We don't have to waste a lot of time at the board meeting to discuss it. Maybe there needs to be a separate meeting with interested board members to go through all of this. But crime and vandalism not only plays to the psyche of the ridership and affects ridership, which affects revenue of the agency, but it's also costing the agency money in repairs and replacements. So let's take the time to use technology as a tool to help law enforcement reduce the level of crime that exists today, whether it's property related or people related, to raise the bar in terms of the safety of the system.
Commissioner Milholtis.
So thank you, Chief O'Reilly, and thank you, Chief McGowan. The issue that I have is you both say that crime is down in the system, but yet our riders don't feel safe, right? And unless our riders feel safe, they're not going to come back into the system. And exactly what Larry said, you're not going to get the revenue, you're not going to get the people back. So there's some sort of disconnect. What do? You say we need more cameras. Okay, so we'll sit down and you can tell us, we can work on a plan to figure out where to put the cameras. What else do? Do we increase the amount of police officers in the system, make them more visible so people feel safe? I mean, I know the mayor just announced that he was going to put more police officers in Midtown Manhattan to give the appearance that things are safe, to bring people into Midtown. Maybe we can piggyback on that. But I think we need to be a little bit more, work a little bit more together, because there is a big disconnect, right? I mean, the number one issue that the riders have is they don't feel the system is safe. And I really believe if we don't change that, people are not going to use our system.
And I agree with you. And I think everybody, including everybody on the board and on this call, should be telling people that the subway system is safe. And this way, we will sway away from that perception argument. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with perception that the subway is not safe. Every day I ride the subway. The subway is safe. My family rides the subway. We have to keep getting that message out instead of talking about crime in the subway. Crime is at record lows, even as the ridership has increased.
Chief, I mean, this morning, I didn't ride the subway this morning, but my mother's 2 aides did, and they were terrified. One rode the 6 and one rode the 1. And they know I'm on the MTA board. And they came and they said, Miss Hayda, can you help me? There was a man that was chasing me. And I said, why didn't you call Inez? So there's a disconnect. I'm sorry, there's a disconnect. Not everyone feels safe on the subway.
Hayda, what we need is the 2019 crime statistics against the ridership levels pre-pandemic versus the ridership levels during the pandemic. Because I believe that when you look at the ridership levels of 2019 and you look at crime based on those ridership levels, crime is actually higher on a ridership basis in 2021 or 2020. So just to say that crime is down and it's safe is like a fake narrative. So until the NYPD can provide me and the board statistics to compare apples to apples, because it should be the percentage of the various crime categories based on the ridership usage of 2019 against the ridership numbers versus the crime in 20 and 21, anyone could say crime is down. Of course it's down. There's fewer people using the system right now. There was a lot less people using the system in 2020, and there's fewer people now in 2021. So, Chief, with all due respect, I don't have your expertise, but you got to give me the 2019 numbers, and I'll say, and you know, to show me that crime is really down.
If we go back to-
down from a statistic
Larry.
thing, time from a reality thing.
Okay, so if we go back 2 years, we're down 41%. If we go back 3 years, we're down 40%.
So can I jump in for a second? Can I jump in for a second? So a couple of things. First of all, the suggestion that we're fear-mongering, I just think is unfair. We're reflecting where our customers are. 75% of our customers are focused on this issue and want more police in the system. 87% of our customers say it's either extremely important to them or very important to them. And so it's just important, you know, and I said this the other day, the answer to this issue cannot be just stop talking about it. Just stop talking about what your customers are worried about. Our entire purpose here is we're supposed to be delivering good, safe, secure service and efficient service for our customers. So we can't just pretend that what our customers care about doesn't matter. Now, there's tons of debate back and forth on the numbers. From our perspective, right now we're at 3.1 felonies and misdemeanors per million riders. That's slightly down from where we were last year, which was 3.4, but that's way up versus 2019 when we were at 2.0. So I know the grand larcenies are down significantly. That's wonderful news. No one is going to say that we don't want grand larcenies down significantly. But the reality is grand larcenies are driving the numbers here. And it's great that they're down, but it doesn't mean that everything else is fine and that everything else is you know, a rose picture. And what is frustrating is to go back and forth between the various departments and agencies on the numbers, when the point is how people feel. And me going out there and saying, the system doesn't feel right, the system doesn't feel safe, we're hearing from this from our customers all the time, does not mean I'm rooting against New York, and it doesn't mean I'm rooting against the system, and it doesn't mean I'm a fearmonger. It says we can deliver for our customers in a better way, and we should be doing it, not pretending that this just isn't the case. We can't just pretend that people don't feel this way. They do. And not every single feeling that happens in the subway or thing that happens in the subway is reflected in these index crimes. So thank God we don't have, you know, tons of you know, sexual assaults and rapes and murders and grand larcenies and all of that. But none of that reflects the fact that we've got a mental health crisis in this city that that is very much living underground. That we have a substance abuse problem in this city that is very much living underground right now. And that we've got a system that sometimes feels desolate, which is, you know, a problem for riders who are entering cars by themselves or standing alone in stations and are having interactions with folks who are either experiencing a mental health crisis or are aggressive in some other way. So, you know, for folks who don't think that this is actually the case, poll the people that you know who are actually riding the system. 3 out of 5 women in my office have had a very bad experience in the last couple of months. And we don't have to, you know, and we don't go into all the details and we don't publicize this for everyone. And we don't talk about every single crime that occurs in the system because you're right. We shouldn't be trying to scare people with details. But we need to acknowledge that the way the system feels right now is not the way it should feel. And it's certainly not the way that it feels when there are 6 million people a day using the system. And if we want to get back to 6 million people a day using the system, we've got to keep our active passengers feeling comfortable, and we've got to get our lapsed passengers back. And if you've been out of the system for a year and your first experience in the system is one that scares you or one that makes you feel like, you know what, I'm going to stick to the car for the next 6 months, I'll try it again in a year. That's not what's going to bring the city back, and it's not what's going to bring the MTA back. So, you know, harassment is a real thing, and just because it's not reflected in the index numbers doesn't mean that it's not important. So, you know, we can go back and forth on numbers all day. I'm happy to do it. They're in front of you. They're in front of me. We can talk about it. But, you know, it doesn't acknowledge.
Let's go back and forth on the
If I could say one more thing on cameras before I give up the microphone. We have installed more cameras in the New York City transit system in the last year than any other year in history. I've said that we are putting cameras on every single platform and in every single station. And so, you know, and I'm happy to try for trains, although, you know, that's a whole other project. But I've said that publicly. We're putting them in every single station, every single platform. So, we should bring back the camera plan from a couple of years ago and update it to reflect where we are now. But I agree with you, Chief O'Reilly. That's why we're installing cameras all the time at maximum speed.
So Commissioner Brown, Commissioner Albert, Commissioner Lynn.
Yeah, well, first of all, this period, we have very interesting statistics in people's behavior during the COVID period. However, it's a bunch of statistical noise. So obviously we can all look at this and grab some statistic out of this Milky Way of statistics that's all distorted by COVID. We can do that if we want. And if you want to make the system look, it's what she is giving you are absolute statistics. So it doesn't mean we should not be looking those absolute statistics and say those absolute numbers and saying we failed. We haven't failed. Absolute crime is going down according to the statistics Ms. Porteous has presented. Now, Larry's correct as well that relative crime has, in Sarah's point, relative crime has gone up, and that can both everybody's feelings can be explained within this statistical disarray. Now, calling for apples to apples in this environment is silly. There's a pre-COVID apple and there's a post-COVID apple, and then there's some pears in here, and you don't really know. You're learning a lot about things by looking at these statistics now, but the statistics don't make any final view. So I personally think the view of crime in the absolute is a correct view. And I personally believe that it's going in the right direction because more people are going back on the trains, and more people on the trains makes the place safer. Yeah, bring on all the cameras. I'm all in favor of that. I don't know why we don't have it further along. But to say that that crime is going up is not correct either. People's feelings, on the other hand, my personal feelings are: crowded car, I'm only afraid of COVID. An empty car, I'm afraid of everybody that gets on. So that's the way everybody feels.
All right, so Commissioner Albert and Commissioner Lynn, hang on one second. Chief O'Reilly, did you want to say something?
Yes, and thank you, Sarah, for the cameras. I really do appreciate everything that you do. But you mentioned persons in crisis, and we do see what you see. A lot of times persons in crisis seek refuge in the subway system. And, NYPD Transit, we're willing to work with our DHS partners, Commissioner Banks, the MTA, and other social services to get them the help they need. So I just wanted to acknowledge that point.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Albert, Commissioner Lynn.
Sure. So I agree with what many of my colleagues have said. Statistics are one thing, but if people don't actually feel safe, then we must do something to make the system more appealing to them. I think the presence of police officers, and I have always said it is really important that they be at turnstiles because the people committing crimes are not paying their fares. If we can keep them out at the turnstiles, we've made the system a whole lot safer. I think cameras are extremely important. If we need to check them after a particular crime to see who was where at what time, and we can tie a perpetrator and possibly ban them from the system if it's a repeat offender. I know the former police chief, Della Torre, was very strong on that point of getting people banned if they are repeat offenders. I'm wondering, Chief O'Reilly, if you have any statistics, updated statistics on fare evasion, because I see it every day, 3 or 4 times every time I ride, and about the percentage of hate crimes. Are those going down?
So our fare evasion, we're up 8% fare evasion. We wrote 18,000 fare evasion summonses so far this year. We average.
And do you know how many of those are repeat offenders?
I don't have that with me right now, but I will try and get you that data.
Thanks. And on the subject of hate crimes, what are those statistics?
20 versus 28, we are seeing, an increase in Asian hate crimes, 7 versus 0.
Thank you.
So, Pat, can I go?
Commissioner Lynn, yes.
So let me try and sort of gather together a number of streams that have been spoken about today. First, I want to emphasize that I think this robust conversation has been excellent, and I think it supports the type of thing that Lisa Daglian and Rachel Foss suggested, which is we need more public discussion, more committee meetings to discuss this, because I think these are the types of things that are often discussed at length in committees, and with public involvement, I think would be very useful. So I think it only underscores how we need to go back to the system we had before as soon as we possibly can. On the substantive issue that so many people have been talking about, as all the board members know, almost 2 months ago, I emailed the board to say that I had serious concerns with the MTA's public discussion of the safety situation. I wrote that I believed the MTA was not painting an accurate picture and inadvertently may have been fueling a misguided tabloid public frenzy. Sadly, since that time, I think the MTA's actions have continued, and the ensuing public concern and tabloid frenzy, it was probably advertent, not inadvertent. And I think it is important to start with the facts. And I think there's two very important pages in the documents that really speak to some of the things that people have talked about, including Larry's point, which is, for instance, page 90 of the transit book says that major crime of the first 3 months of this year were down 53%. Now, we know ridership was down by 67%. So that in that capacity, yes, ridership is down more than crime, but it's down a lot. And that we ought to acknowledge that it is down a lot. Compare that with citywide, where major crime has only been down by 16%. Or compare it to your own commuter rail book on page 29, where your commuter rail book is only down by 19% for that period of time. So by the standards of whatever you look for, what the MTA police are doing at the commuter rails, what the city is doing outside of the transit authority, by any standard, the transit work is good, and we should be acknowledging it. We shouldn't be downplaying what they've been doing. So I think the numbers show us, when you look at it on a per capita basis, any way you look at it, we're not experiencing runaway crime in the subways, and we're not experiencing migration from outside the subways into the subways. But the real question is, how do we work together to get the right resources to the right place at the right time? And that's to Larry's concept, which is CompStat. What type of CompStat data is available? Now, I think Pat Warren has been discussing in the safety committee that also the transit authority is working on developing its own type of quality of life CompStat data. And that's what we need. Where are the issues taking place? For Andrew's point, where are the fare evasion going? When? What locations? Bus, trains, what time of day? Those things need to be known. There are limited resources we can bring to the picture, and that we need to know the what, where, and when of these items so that we can then harness the resources. Now, whether we harness the resources, there's lots of resources. There's the 500 cops that were authorized. And I know Sarah likes to point out that I was not a big fan of the 500 cops, but they were authorized by the board. We ought to get up there. The bridge and tunnel officers were authorized to assist in fare evasion. Civilian MTA employees have been part of Eagle teams and ought to be part of a process. We've all said social workers and social service professionals need to be part of this. Specialized training needs to be part of this. Surging the NYPD needs to be part of it. And most importantly, it needs to be harnessed to technology. It's not just a scatter, let's put a cop everywhere. We know how it's impossible to put a cop everywhere. What we need is to harness the resources with CCTV, with the slam gates, looking at 311, which Sarah has talked about, looking at the fare payment readers to see where we can find that people are evading fare. The resource deployment resources should be deployed by quality of life CompStat, working with the MTA, with the city, getting to a 21st century technology, harnessing it together, and we should stop casting blame. We should start working together, and I think it's within our grasp. And the work that's being done in the safety committee suggests it's within our grasp, and we ought to get down to business and do it together.
So I'm going to assert
gonna
the chairman's. Sorry, Chief. Do you want to say something?
I want to say something.
Sarah.
So again, no one is saying that crime is rampant and out of control in the subway. Just not true. No one's saying that. No one is saying that. What we're saying is we have a huge number of customers who are worried about it. And that the crime is at a rate that it shouldn't be. And it's higher than it should be given how low ridership is. I've said repeatedly, the NYPD is our partner. We try to work closely with them. I've said repeatedly, the city is our partner. We try to work closely with them. Not everything is about throwing blame around. We're trying to actually just get things into a better spot. Bob, if you are riding the system, if you are using the system and you feel comfortable and you feel like everyone you're talking to and the people you're talking to feel good, that's great. I want to know where those places are. We are talking to customers all the time and hearing from customers all the time about where things don't feel good. But I certainly want your feedback too, and I want to hear your, firsthand accounts. But no one is trying to get into a blame game and have a huge fight. We're just trying to get it into a better place. The next 3 to 6 months are critical in terms of getting ridership back. And we've got to get this into a better place in the coming months so that we can bring people back. If we can't get them back in the next couple of months, I believe it's going to be harder and take longer in the future.
Yeah, so let me synthesize and summarize, and then let's move on.
Pat.
Yeah, Linda, hang on 1 second, please.
Yeah, and when you're done, I'd like to make a brief comment.
Of course. Point one, the subways are safe. Some areas of crime are up, some are down. For instance, felony assaults in the last month were up. As Chief O'Reilly pointed out, many major crime areas are down, but that's not consistent. Ridership is down, and some areas of crime on a ridership adjusted basis are up, some are flat. We surveyed 25,000 people. We do this regularly. 75% of our customers said they're concerned about crime and harassment. If you ride the subways, as we all do, and you go to Penn Station and you go to other stations, harassment is a real issue. Commissioner Mihaltis reported the 2 home aides this morning. That is a real thing. It is not an index crime. It is real. But at a point where we want millions of people to return to their offices and to restaurants and to Yankee Stadium and to Broadway and to all the things that are not happening in New York and must happen for the recovery, we need to be able to convince people that the system is safe, which it is, and they will be free from harassment. On the camera issue, last year a record number of cameras were installed in the subways on the commuter rails, nearly 1,000. That number will be exceeded in 2021. We have the capital. We have the capital to do that, and we'll continue to do that. Commissioner Lacewell.
Sorry, I just had to unmute. Thank you, Pat, and thank you, everybody, for the dialogue. I'm not going to repeat what anybody said. I don't think that's helpful. I do want to make 1 or 2 very brief observations. Number one, public safety is not just being safe, it's feeling safe. And experiencing fear while living in the city or going into the system is a public safety issue. And it's our obligation, not only with respect to attracting returning riders, but for our existing ridership, to do everything that we can within reason to make sure that they're not in fear when they're in any part of the system. I understand because there are less people in the system, you're more likely to feel fearful, irrespective of what the statistics are anywhere. If I walk into an alley with no lighting and there's nobody there and it's dark, I'm going to feel fear because I don't know what's going to happen and there's nobody there to see. So I think it's important to focus on fear as something to combat and to focus on our existing ridership, many of whom have no choice but to take the subway. Poor people, people of color, who've been adversely affected by everything that we've gone through, disproportionately adversely affected over the past year, whether it's COVID, public health, or the economic impact. I do not believe we have done enough about crime unless the numbers are zero. And I'm a former prosecutor, and I've never experienced a situation where any police person thought, I have all the resources I need, I don't need anything else. When you've got a board that's saying, let us partner with you and help you, then take it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Foran, would you please update us on MTA finances?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Now, David Keller will discuss the details of our year-to-date financial performance as he presents Budget Watch during the Finance Committee report. But I want to give you a quick report on the impact of the enacted state budget on our finances. The enacted 2021 to 2022 state budget is $143 million favorable to the MTA compared with our own budget. Based on the timing of the state fiscal year relative to our calendar year budget, we expect to see $118 million in 2021 and the remaining $25 million in 2022. Also, State Division of Budget has informed us that we'll be receiving this month an additional $98 million from the 2020 to 2021 state fiscal year appropriation. This is in addition to the $429 million we received in March. This $429 million that we were told about was already put into the 2021 budget. These two items result in higher on-budget subsidies of $216 million for the MTA in 2021 compared to our forecast in the 2021 February financial plan.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Bob? Good. Jano.
Good morning, Board. I had in the book a detailed CPOC report that covers a range of topics that were scheduled to be covered, and I'm happy to take questions, and obviously the IEC as well as our staff is available to take questions. But in the meantime, I was asked to give a presentation on the status of the Penn Station Master Plan effort, which we have been engaged in for some time with Amtrak and NJT, our partners. It is especially timely for us to be looking at this at the moment when the Biden administration's American Jobs Plan infrastructure initiative has begun to percolate its way through the Congress, because this is a transformative project, really transforming Penn Station. Not only is necessary to make sure that the gateway vision, the long-awaited gateway vision, is achieved, but also because Penn Station, and I will go through it, speaks so powerfully to the goals, to the climate goals and the equity goals that the Biden administration has set forth so strongly. So I'm going to take you through this quickly, and well, it's going to take a little while, but quickly, and obviously will be available for questions at the end. Just a quick refresher. We talk about the Empire Station Complex. You've heard that term, and that's because Penn Station is emerging as a three-part complex. Of course, you have historic Penn Station between 7th and 8th Avenue, sharing that block with Madison Square Garden. But at the end of 2020, Moynihan Train Hall was opened across 8th Avenue, and it's completely integrated with underground using the same platforms and tracks as existing Penn Station. And then, of course, it's necessary to expand Penn Station, although we're still in the process of looking at options. The governor has talked about Block 780, the block to the south of existing Penn Station between 30th and 31st Street, as the most likely location to expand, so there will be tracks and platforms where we can receive the trains that, as you see in this image, are going to come out of the new Gateway Tunnel, which is illustrated in red on this image. The Gateway Tunnels are going to lead into the new expansion. So we very much need to have, as that tunnel project has picked up steam in Washington, and it has been described by all kinds of people in Washington as literally the #1 infrastructure project in the nation. As that project picks up steam, the tunnel project, we need to take action to make sure that there is a New York side of Gateway to receive that additional capacity. Talking about the whole complex, Moynihan Train Hall, which, as I said, opened at the end of last year, was a watershed moment in the history of Penn Station and for the region. Not just because it reminds us what a great transportation facility can and should be as a light-filled public space, but also because of its practical benefits, the incredible navigability of this, the intuitive navigation as you can see all of the tracks and platforms as you enter, the incredible addition of vertical circulation, stairs, escalators, elevators, to get people on and off the platforms at Penn Station more quickly. And this is important because while Amtrak, which is the primary user of Moynihan, but while Amtrak usually takes about 20 to 22 minutes to load a train, commuter trains, which is the primary user of Penn Station, take about 6 minutes. So spreading people along the platform with more vertical circulation is hugely important. The other practical reality is that with East Side Access coming online at the end of next year, knock wood, we're working on it, and also having Moynihan Station, which serves the Long Island Railroad as well as Amtrak, we have the opportunity for the first time to really attack what's wrong with Penn Station, to do serious construction in that very, very antiquated facility. So this is a transformational moment. I have to make sure the board understands the MTA did an enormous amount to make this happen. We guaranteed, in addition to the $800+ million of state money that funded Moynihan, the MTA put its credit behind a $550 million loan that was essential to the completion of Moynihan. So starting to think about what's wrong with existing Penn, and as I said, we've done this collaboratively with Amtrak and NJT and a great team of consultants at FX Collaborative and WSP. The problems start with the street level. Anybody, the array of entrances which are inconsistent and unbranded and do not stand out in the streetscape means that if you stand on 7th Avenue and 33rd Street for 10 minutes and look like you know what you're doing, you know where you're going, somebody will ask you where Penn Station is. It makes no sense at all for the busiest transportation facility in North America to be hidden from the public. Well, we began to attack this, we began to attack this with a project which opened at the same time as Moynihan at the end of last year, which is a brand new, what we call East End Gateway, a significant, architecturally significant, highly visible entrance at 33rd Street and 7th Avenue, which restores the presence of Penn Station onto 7th Avenue. I don't know how many folks have gotten a chance to see it, but it is really transformational in terms of visibility and the, obviously having more escalators and stairs in and out of that incredibly crowded Long Island Railroad concourse is a huge safety benefit from an emergency standpoint. But when you get to the bottom of that new bank of stairs and escalators, what you'll find is we're already underway in expanding that really important east-west corridor that runs from the 7th Avenue subway all the way to 8th Avenue subway and then underneath to Moynihan Station. We're doubling the width of that project of that corridor we call the Long Island Railroad Concourse, and raising the ceiling significantly, redoing the retail, redoing the finishes. This is going to dramatically upgrade the busiest area of the station. And I would add, don't forget, between the 7th and 8th Avenue subways, those two stations together represent the second busiest ridership level of any station complex in our system after Times Square. This is not just a commuter station, this is a subway center to the max. The problems we cannot address, though, through this existing project, which, we can work with the Long Island Railroad Concourse because it's under the street. There is not another level above it, the Amtrak level, the so-called B level, which is above the Long Island Railroad level. And what that means is that all of the concourses, the north-south concourses, the fingers that come off of that big east-west concourse that we're already working on, have low ceilings and are incredibly cramped. And unfortunately, those are the areas where people go to get onto the tracks and get onto the platforms via stairs and escalators. This situation, if we do not do something about it, will get worse, because when the expansion is built, those concourses, those north-south concourses, are going to have to provide access to the new expansion. There will be New Jersey Transit and Amtrak customers expecting to move through those areas, in addition to the Long Island Railroad and Metro North customers who are going to be using it. So let's talk about who uses this, the Penn Station. You know, we have to deal with the reality. This was built as an intercity rail facility by the Pennsylvania Railroad, and it's now owned by Amtrak, another intercity operator, but it has become overwhelmingly a commuter station. The Amtrak accounts in 2019 for just 7% of trips out of Penn, and in fact, if you include the subway customers, the percentages skew even more to passenger, to subway and commuter railroad customers. New Jersey Transit ridership is actually expected to double with the construction of the new station. MTA, and now using a 2038 projection, MTA will remain by far the largest user overall between Long Island Railroad and the Metro North customers who are coming in when we finish the Penn Access project, including, most important, people in the Bronx living in transit deserts who right now have virtually zero access to traditional mass transit. I would also add that when we plan for the future, we at the MTA have insisted that the planning make provision, in understanding that it's not yet in the capital program, but for the Empire Tunnel, which comes down the west side of Manhattan, to now accommodate Hudson Line Metro North service. So we, as we're planning this new station or improved station, we are planning for the future of that service to become shortened and hopefully more convenient coming down the west side at some future time. And we're planning for west of Hudson service to be able to come directly into Penn when New Jersey Transit and the MTA in the future build what they call the Secaucus Loop. So that's an important part. But it's a commuter station. It's also a station that relies on people coming from the 7th Avenue end of town, end of the station predominantly. That's understandable. People are coming from the center of Midtown, and they're coming from the 7th Avenue end disproportionately rather than the 8th Avenue end. And that's reflected in where they board. People are boarding the trains from the 7th Avenue end of the station. And that's one of the reasons that we find that the upper level of Penn is less useful from a transportation standpoint, because all of its vertical circulation to and from the platforms is located at the 8th Avenue end. More on that later. But so how do we fix Penn Station? The first thing is, there are 4 steps. The first thing is we have to increase rail capacity by adding tracks and platforms. That's what the expansion, that's what the Gateway program is about. And we call that expansion Empire South as part of the Empire Station complex. Step 2 is to add a lot more stairs and escalators and elevators to the platform to address this issue of spreading riders so that more people can get on and get off of trains safely and quickly. The other major steps are we have to increase passenger circulation. Anybody who uses Penn knows that it is a passenger circulation nightmare. But importantly, we got to make it easier to navigate. When you enter Penn now, it feels like a box. You're immediately disoriented. There's no light. There's no intuitive navigation. You're following signs. You don't know where you're going. And this is bad, especially from an emergency standpoint. We need passengers to have clear sight lines to and from exits. And also, we need to regain the street presence and to reintroduce daylight, the daylight that was lost when the destruction of the original Penn Station took place in the early 1960s. All of those things are not just luxuries, they're fundamental, as we now see from Moynihan, to a high-functioning transportation facility. I'm going to take you through two basic alternatives that we have developed with Amtrak and NJT, although there will be some more discussion and public process before we finalize the preference. The first thing is, in any version of any of this, we're going to dramatically increase the number of what they call VCEs, vertical circulation elements, escalators, stairways, and elevators to the platform, for all the reasons that I've already made clear. In the two-level alternative, where you preserve the upper Amtrak level, we are going to provide, first step would be to provide significant additional vertical circulation. And then if you look at the diagram, what we're doing is taking that center area, which is now occupied exclusively by the rotunda and the waiting area, and turning it into a natural pedestrian east-west spine, because all of the access to the tracks and platforms is at, if you know Amtrak, it's all at the west end, at the 8th Avenue end of the station. Easier circulation. The other thing we're going to do is to knock out some limited areas of the upper level to create some visual connection between the upper and lower levels. And this is what it might give you. A two-story atrium down the center of that of the station, so it would feel, again, more vertical connectivity, more visual connectivity, also more orientation and easier movement. So that's, if you see in the upper right corner, that gives you the perspective of what it looks like today. It's that slightly underutilized rotunda area when you come down the escalator from the taxiway. Here is the same vision, but looking from the 8th Avenue end back towards the 7th Avenue end, looking at it from the upper level. On the lower level, what we want to do, and this is true of both plans, is to dramatically expand those, what I call those north-south concourses, those the fingers that come off of the Big Long and Railroad concourse, so that people can move much more quickly onto tracks and the vertical circulation to get to tracks and platform, have a very different circulation experience. And as you see in the diagram on the right, that's where people are going to connect to the new expansion of Penn Station necessary for Gateway. On the single-level alternative, we would expand those connections even more. You see how we've eased the corners of some of those connections. That's possible because the core idea that we are working with about the lower level is that's where people get on and off most of the trains. It's where most of the access to the tracks and platforms is. We have to make it really useful and really comfortable for everybody. And the key here is not only making it wider, but we also have to, excuse me, getting ahead of myself, we also have to raise up the ceilings, and that's only possible in what we call the single-level alternative. It's not truly single-level because you're only taking out 40% of the upper Amtrak level, but it is a much more wide-open space, the opportunity to have that feeling of a modern train station like Moynihan. And now let's show you a little bit what that looked like. That is, you're standing at roughly the area that you now, where everybody crowds to look at that great signage, the sign where all the platform assignments are displayed in the Long Island Railroad lower level of Penn Station. And look how much wider and how much better the circulation is. If you look just to the south on the left, that's the crossover point to get to this future expansion for Gateway, what we call Empire South. So it really opens things up. It's the size of Grand Central's Great Hall plus another 40% or so. So it's a major open space. The other thing we could do that we couldn't necessarily do in the double level alternative is completely blow out the existing taxiway, which hasn't been used. If you know Penn Station, that taxiway hasn't been used since 9/11 for security reasons. So blow it out, and that allows you to have major new entrances in the mid-block between 7th and 8th Avenue. Here you're looking from 7th Avenue west towards 8th Avenue, and in the middle of the block, just behind 2 Penn Plaza, what you're seeing is a major new entrance to Penn Station. And inside, you would get a glass-filled, amazing, skylit a space that would be really what we call the train hall, and it really makes a difference. It's the same area shown from down at the floor level. Obviously, a very different experience than you have in existing Penn. So we're excited about that. And the result of this is that spine, the whole east-west spine of this area, the center of the station, which is now blocked off by all of that the gray area, the back of house space and the mechanical rooms and the residual structure from Old Penn, we would scoop all that out, push it up to the upper level where we could consolidate it out of the passenger's way and open it all up for passenger circulation. And that's a much bigger atrium type space than even we were able to achieve in the vision of a double level thing. And that is the plan that deals with this condition, which deals with these narrow, low ceiling concourses which force people into environments that don't feel passenger friendly. Obviously, difference impacts in terms of those east-west concourses between single and double level, but we're working these through with our partners in the two other railroads. Another issue that we were asked to look at, which I want to brief on quickly, is the idea of taking over the Hulu Theater, which is a 5,000-seat theater within the structure of Madison Square Garden, separate from the main arena, and taking that over and turning, which would allow you to have a real entrance instead of a blank wall on 8th Avenue between 31st and 33rd Street across 8th Avenue from Moynihan. You could have a real entrance, and it would also give you the opportunity to have a train hall of similar grandeur and passenger amenity, and also, most important, intuitive navigation as you walked in from 8th Avenue. The downside of this plan, and I'll share it with you, is it may be disproportionately expensive. Although Madison Square Garden, whatever it would cost to acquire the space from Madison Square Garden is one thing, but the real cost is the disentangling all of the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems of the arena, which would remain, from the Hulu Theater. And that is, a $1 billion plus cost that the result would be north of $1 billion for this whole thing. And in light of the fact that Moynihan already provides an incredible level of amenity for the 8th Avenue passenger, we have, I would say, de-emphasized this, at least in the MTA's view, as a priority. The 7th Avenue side is where the people are and where we need to prioritize. The other thing that we believe that this single level approach could deal with is, on the right in this image, you see Madison Square Garden loading literally on 33rd Street. And it's a huge impact to the community and to the streetscape and to what this neighborhood feels like. The reason is that the big trucks that they use for sets and stages, which is very much part of their events program, don't fit in the loading dock. So what we would do is, in addition to taking over the taxiway and creating that great skylit train hall that I showed you, we could also adjust the level of the Madison Square Garden loading dock by taking out the taxiway in a way that would allow the big trucks to enter. It would allow them to go straight to loading dock so they wouldn't have to double handle off of the street, and also to exit smoothly onto 31st Street instead of having these crazy reverse K-turn movements. So there's a major advantage in terms of the streetscape impacts of Madison Square Garden if we go with this approach. Finally, just an image of what that might yield. You have the idea of having a street which is shut to traffic other than to the Madison Square Garden trucks and the loading dock headed trucks for 2 Penn, but other than that, closed, made pedestrianized, and truly become much more part of a pedestrian-friendly streetscape. 33rd Street is the major spine coming from the Herald Square and this area over to Hudson Yards, Manhattan West, and to the Javits Center. So the city, our colleagues in the city of New York, especially, are interested in this pedestrianization concept. You also see in this image the idea that even if you don't acquire the Hulu Theater, you could blow out and expand the corner entrances on 8th Avenue and 31st and 33rd Street in a way that deals with the visibility problem. So with apologies for taking a little more of the board's time, I will leave it there. I just have to say that this is our chance. The reason that we're pushing forward with this is the tunnel project is obviously getting a lot of great attention as the Biden infrastructure ban unfolds, but we know we need to have a Penn Station that is ready to receive that additional capacity when the tunnels are completed. It's not that far away. And we need existing Penn to be fully renovated because that's where the New Yorkers are going to be. The East River tunnels that take you into the tracks and platforms under existing Penn ain't moving. The New Yorkers are still going to be there, and it's the New Yorkers who ride Long Island Railroad. It's the New Yorkers who use Metro North. It's hopefully in the future the west of Hudson passengers on Metro North, as well as the new Penn Access passengers from the Amtrak Hellgate line. And it's the subway, that incredible concentration of subway passengers. We need the plan to include full reconstruction of existing Penn in some of the ways that I've described. So with that, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Compelling presentation, Jano. Thanks. Commissioner Zuckerman and then Commissioner Jones. Commissioner Calisi.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, Neil.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm walking the dog. My wife sent me out to takes a village during COVID when you're working from home.
Thanks for sharing that.
Well, I like to be direct and honest, so
good.
Not that you thought I was not paying attention. So, a universal comment and a parochial one. First of all, Jano, an amazingly bold vision. I appreciate you bringing this expertise that you've done big things before to do big things again. I appreciate the governor's foresight. I remember being with Vinny, I think, and others when we went down to Moynihan when it was an empty shell, and the governor talked about what Moynihan had said to him, go get good things done. So you are doing good things, and I love the boldness of the vision. That's the universal comment. The parochial one is the following. I've raised before, and we discussed a study in the current capital plan to allow Hudson Line traffic into Penn Station. I have heard lots of the audiences and customers that could benefit. I'd like us to make sure we are considering how we could benefit those of us on the Hudson Line of Metro North getting access to Penn Station. As someone who works in the Hudson Yards complex, or at least hopes to return to work there soon, I know that is a meaningful audience that we can serve. It would be an incredibly thoughtful way of expanding the value of Penn Station, and it would make Metro North that much more attractive to those who live on the Hudson River side of Westchester and Putnam and Dutchess. So I hope we have a way to include that access in our planning.
So Neil, I respectfully, I think your pooper scooper responsibilities may have distracted you momentarily, because I did say in the presentation that we are planning as part of the sizing of the capacity expansion that we're working with Amtrak and NJT on to make sure that future direction of the Hudson Line through the Empire Tunnel down the west side is part of the planning model. So you have that assurance. It also includes planning for, as I said, west of Hudson service via the Secaucus Loop.
I heard that.
Okay.
I heard the west of Hudson. I didn't hear the Hudson Line, which is great. Quincy has not yet done number 2, but I have been attentive to that at this point.
Got it. Thank you.
Commissioner Jones, Commissioner Calisi.
Jano, I thought one of the best presentations I've heard, but it raises the question and the issue that Bob Lynn has raised. We're sort of being flooded with information with no advanced documentation and no serious committee response. I think what you're saying is extraordinary, but I haven't had a chance to analyze it in any way, nor it may be beyond my pay grade. But the fact that we've compressed this kind of presentation into this incredibly tight series of meetings, or one meeting, is just not allowing us as fiduciaries to even participate actively. I'm being lectured at, and I'm sure what you said is right, but not having the full committee meetings, not having public exposure of these issues is just not appropriate for us as fiduciaries. So that's less a question for you, but more for Pat and how we're going to deal with this going forward.
So Commissioner, Jano's briefing is an informational briefing. We're not acting on this at this meeting. Given the attention that Penn Station area has gotten, we thought it was appropriate that Jano present this presentation. I think the reaction that you and Commissioner Zuckerman had, that this is a bold, compelling vision, is exactly right. I think many people share that, but there will be lots of discussion and review, and we're not asking the board this month or next month to take any action.
I understand that, Pat, but we can't even comment effectively. in this kind of constrained series of meetings. We have to be getting back to some more open meeting and committee meetings again. And it has to be, now we have to get a timeline for that.
I agree.
Commissioner Calisi.
Thank you. Yes, I do would like to see open meetings as well. But Jano, thank you again for your presentation. I like the way that you're bringing a bold vision, and everything that comes in with this new vision certainly is accessible under the ADA. So that really is a game changer in seeing that. I would encourage through big areas like this and the Moynihan station that's open to really think about wayfinding in all of this and using the accessibility lab that was in Brooklyn and using some of those wayfinding tactics because it certainly would be helpful in Moynihan as well. And I just want to pivot quickly to something old and our old transit system and how we have to make it accessible. And something that we just launched was Elevate Transit zoning for accessibility last month. Jano, you were there as well, and it certainly is a game changer that would enable the MTA to go beyond the existing accessibility commitments in the 2024 capital plan and add elevators throughout a system at an even faster pace, saving money and reallocating that to other accessibility needs. Elevators are for everyone. Inclusive design is building for an accessible future and is really good for the public. And this really is an initiative that is a unique partnership between the state, the city, and the advocacy community. I've been thinking about this for some time when I worked with the Parks Department and seeing how they added this to the High Line. And as both an MTA board member and commissioner of the New York City Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, I'm excited to see this draft proposal move forward and look forward to system-wide accessibility for everyone, because zoning for transit accessibility is a big win for the disability community. And we need the support, and we need people to support, go to their community boards, city council meetings, their board presidents, to really get this measure approved. So thank you, because this will improve.
Thank you. And in case I wasn't clear, everything that we're talking about in Penn obviously will be fully ADA compliant. But I also thank you for the plug for zoning for accessibility. Our staff was working on that with the Department of City Planning and the advocacy community for some years. So it's a very exciting milestone that we were able to roll it out, and I hope that the council will move forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Anybody else on?
Yes.
Andrew.
Yeah, Jano, thanks so much for the presentation. As everybody else said, it's a really bold vision for what has become a very pedestrian station, the new Moynihan train hall being the exception, and the new stairway up to 33rd, 7th Avenue and 33rd being the exception. I have a lot of questions, but because it's late, I will just narrow it down to one question. When you enter now from the 7th Avenue side of the station and you walk along the concourse, prior to arriving at the Amtrak waiting room, there is a whole New Jersey Transit section of the station on 2 different levels. I'm just wondering what happens to that part of the station under your new plan?
Well, the idea is to create a much more integrated station than we have now with these sort of balkanized Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, and Long Island Railroad areas. And that will be necessitated by the fact that there's going to be New Jersey Transit folks who are, down in the expansion at, a new track 1, and coming right up through the existing Penn. So you're going to have a much more fully operational station. Amtrak passengers are going to be in Moynihan, but also a little bit in the expansion. So you're going to have the vision is a single integrated, collaborative, open station without these separated areas, a little like you see in Moynihan, where the signage, for example, has been unified and standardized.
Right, but I think it's going to be very important that a Long Island or a New Jersey Transit passenger or an Amtrak passenger not actually look at one common board for their departures. I hope there will be separate boards so that folks can find their train and their track very easily.
Yeah, absolutely. But that is definitely achievable within the context of a truly integrated station.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Barbas.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what others have said, and kudos to Jano and his team. These are incredible incredibly complex transportation, engineering, architectural proposals. And the renderings made it look easy and beautiful, but there's a lot of hard work behind that. And I just want to say how well thought out they are. And the vision also to coordinate with the new Gateway development project. I'm very excited to see more of it, Jano. And I just want to say compliments to the work already done.
Many thanks.
All right, good. We're gonna, sorry, Randy.
Yes, I was excited by this presentation. It's amazing, and to include all the options in the future for west of Hudson is a real plus. And when Bishop does come back, it'll be a great to have. So, thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, Randy. With that, I'm going to turn to Allison DiSereno, who's Deputy COO and our agency lead for Central Business District tolling for an update. Allison, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. We thought it would be a good time, given what our chairman mentioned a little while ago about status, to just walk you through and remind everybody about the program and what it's intended to do, and give you a brief sense of where we are. So you'll recall that you can advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. In 2019, the governor and the legislature passed the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act. There were two primary goals: to reduce congestion and enhance mobility in Manhattan's Central Business District, and raise net revenues to generate $15 billion in support for MTA's 2020 to 2024 capital program. As a result of making those investments in transit, we anticipate that it would further reduce congestion, help improve air quality, and improve travel options for low-income residents. The statute has a number of key features in it. First and foremost is that TBTA is supposed to plan, design, install, construct, operate, and maintain the toll system and infrastructure. And it would do so in coordination with New York City Department of Transportation via a Memorandum of Understanding, which was signed in June of 2019. The statute mandates periods for public outreach 60 days before go live, system testing 30 days before go live, and ensures that tolls would be collected, but no assessment of violation fees for the first 60 days after go live. It also mandates that passenger vehicles would only be tolled once daily for entering or remaining in the Central Business District. And it provides for two exemptions, one for qualifying authorized emergency vehicles and a second for qualifying vehicles transporting persons with disabilities. Finally, the statute requires that there's a tax credit for tolls paid for Central Business District tolling program by those residents residing in the Central Business District who make less than $60,000 annually. The location of the program is 60th Street inclusive and below in Manhattan, as you can see here on the right-hand side. Detection points would be placed at entrances and exits around that entire perimeter. The northern boundary generally would have tolling points between 60th and 61st Streets, and by statute, the West Side Highway or Route 9A and the FDR driver excluded. You can advance to the next slide, please. In terms of a status update, many of you will be aware we received guidance from the Federal Highway Administration on March 30th that we can proceed with an environmental assessment with robust outreach. That robust outreach will include outreach to New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut stakeholders in the metropolitan region, and will, among other things, also be assessing environmental justice issues. And that's our status update at this juncture. As I mentioned, we're now proceeding with the environmental assessment, and we will be back to you along the way.
Thank you, Allison. Any questions for Allison? Commissioner Calisi.
Thank you. So I'm really pleased about the environmental review process moving forward. Certainly going to bring in much needed revenue. We'll certainly push towards system-wide accessibility. And I just want to ensure and clarify that the disability exemption that was written into the legislation will be met because people with disabilities certainly will need this exemption. I know that they're talking about ways to clarify disability, and that's working its way through the city and TVTA now, and of course MTA. So I just want to make sure that discussions are happening, and that's included. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else for Allison? All right, good. Then we're going to turn to board business. We'll start with the minutes, followed by two all-agency items. First, minutes. The minutes of the March joint meeting and minutes from each committee have been distributed to all members. Are there any corrections or omissions? If not, I make a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Paul Fama, Chief People Officer, with respect to the Family Benefits Agreement. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. In April of 2020, the board approved a COVID-19 related death benefit of $500,000 for all employees, both represented and non-represented. This benefit expired on April 13th, 2021. We're asking the board to extend this benefit from April 14th through August 31st of 2021. The first agreement we reached was with the TWU, representing the majority of the represented workforce. We're also asking the board to approve future agreements reached with other unions on the same terms and conditions. The one difference from last year's benefit is effective June 1st. In order to be eligible for the death benefit, the employees must have availed themselves of the vaccine. Please note there are exceptions, as you might expect, for documented reasons such as medical and religious reasons. This ends my presentation.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions for Paul on this matter? I'll make the motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I second that.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The matter passes. I'm going to call on Mark Young to please introduce the commuter railroads, both Long Island and Metro North, mail and ride migration item. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman Foy. Good afternoon, Commissioners. The action item before you seeks board approval of a resolution that would authorize the migration of a relatively small number of remaining Long Island Railroad and Metro North mail and ride customers to the commuter railroad's mobile ticketing application, which, as you know, is e-tix. Just a little background. The mail and ride program is an account-based monthly ticket by mail system. Many of the railroad committee members may be familiar with it more than others. It was developed in 1975, which at its time, 45 years ago, was an innovation. At its peak, there were over 60,000 customers between the two railroads who were enrolled in mail and ride between the two agencies. But with the dramatic expansion of personal mobile device ownership among our customers, as well as regionally, and the introduction of e-tix in 2016, participation in this paper mailing program has dramatically reduced over time as people have come to prefer the mobile option and its convenience. So currently, there are only approximately 6,900 total customers between the two railroads still receiving paper monthly tickets through this program. Many of you know Omni is the new MTA-wide account-based system that's being introduced. And that mobile application, Omni Mobile, will be coming to the commuter railroads. It's planned for 2022, and it will replace mail and ride. So what we're proposing here in this resolution is, in order to facilitate a nice seamless transition to Omni, the railroads are looking forward to fully migrate all of this, as I said, small remaining number of paper ticket mail and ride customers to the mobile application, e-tix. You may be wondering, why is this a board item, this type of thing? It is required because the e-tix application cannot support the provision of a joint monthly railroad ticket and unlimited Metro card product, which is currently an option that is selected by only 1,200 railroad customers. So it's even a smaller universe of the full mail and ride population. The discontinuation of the unlimited monthly Metro card will result in the elimination of the existing 2% discount on the railroad portion of the ticket. So that represents a fare change and does require board approval. So as we're required by the Public Authorities Law, this item, you may recall, was included in the public notice on fare changes that you approved in November of 2020. So if this item is approved, the railroads will migrate all of their customers to the mobile platform in time for the September monthly tickets. And we're designing and would launch a very ambitious public outreach campaign to reach all of these customers that still use paper tickets. And we would expect that effort will be successful in migrating the vast majority of these customers to the mobile application, which, as I said, has been very popular. One last comment, an additional benefit of this is once we do migrate to Omni and e-Tix delivery is no longer required, the MTA will save about $700,000 a year in annual mailing and printing costs. So that's concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mark, for the presentation. Any questions for Mark? I'll make a motion to approve. Do I have a second? All in favor, aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The action carries. Next, I'm going to ask Kathy Rinaldi to report on Metro North. Kathy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to begin with an update on service and ridership. Train service delivery during the month of March continued to perform well, with trains operating above goal at 98.6% and year-to-date on-time performance standing at 98.3%. By line, the Hudson line performed at 99.1%, the Harlem line stood at 99.3%, and New Haven line trains operated at 97.8% on time. West of Hudson service also operated above goal for the month of March at 94.1%. Year-to-date is at 92.9%. The Pascack Valley trains performed at 93.6% on time, and Port Jervis trains operated at 94.8% on time. With respect to Metro North ridership, we do continue to see a slow but steady improvement in our ridership, especially on the weekends. Last week's weekday ridership was up 18.1% from the same week a month ago in March. We're at 23.7% of pre-COVID ridership, which is the highest we've been since COVID began 13 months ago. This past weekend, our ridership was up 30.6% from the same weekend a month ago. We're at 47.9% of our pre-COVID April weekend ridership, which is the second highest weekend ridership we've seen since COVID began. And we're only 1.8% lower than the highest weekend in mid-October, which was at the height of leaf peeping season. Ridership by line last week was as follows. The Hudson line was up to 25.1% of pre-COVID ridership, and this past weekend we carried 55.3% of our pre-COVID weekend ridership. The Harlem line was up to 24.4% of our pre-COVID ridership, and this past weekend we carried 48.0% of our pre-COVID weekend ridership. And the New Haven line was up to 22.5% of our pre-COVID ridership, this past weekend carrying 44.3% of our pre-COVID weekend ridership. Currently, we continue to operate roughly 63% of our regular pre-COVID train service, which at this time meets the current ridership demands. But we are monitoring ridership daily and will adjust service as necessary to respond to increased demand. Going over to the west of Hudson, Pascack Valley ridership has also climbed to about 23% of pre-pandemic levels. Port Jervis ridership has climbed to roughly 21% of pre-pandemic levels, and we remain eager to welcome more customers back to our system. Just a little bit about our recent schedule change. Since the pandemic arrived last year, our main focus had been on moving essential workers. But with more riders returning to the system, we recently adjusted service levels while still disinfecting at unprecedented levels and maintaining high levels of mask compliance. This past weekend, we restored weekend service on the Wassaic branch between Southeast and Wassaic stations with 9 trains in each direction. Customers can change trains at Southeast for express trains to and from Grand Central. This restoration of weekend service also signals the reopening of Appalachian Trail Station with 2 morning northbound trains and 3 afternoon southbound trains, providing more access to hikers and other customers seeking outdoor activities in Dutchess County. On the Hudson Line, we restored weekend service to Manitou Station, which is located near Bear Mountain Bridge and State Park, and the Anthony's Nose Trailhead, which are both popular Hudson Valley destinations. With our Train to the Game service back in play, I was at Yankee Stadium Station to greet Yankee fans on a cold, rainy opening day. We welcomed back nearly 400 baseball fans with trains that are cleaner than ever, providing a safe and convenient ride to the stadium. This past weekend, we handled approximately 600 customers for each game of the 3-game homestand. For New York Yankee fans, we're providing game day service for home games by operating shuttle trains to and from Yankee Stadium between Grand Central, Harlem 125th Street, and Yankees East 153rd Street Station, as well as adding the Yankee Station stop to all Poughkeepsie Express trains. Harlem and New Haven Line customers can make connections to these trains at Harlem 125th Street. We're also adding shuttles and extra stops for opening day of the New York Football Club this coming Saturday, April 24th, to welcome soccer fans back to Yankee Stadium. Throughout the pandemic, Metro-North crews have advanced critical infrastructure work while operating a reduced schedule, since the impacts on train service are not as significant. As our construction season kicks into high gear, Metro-North crews began work this past week on the Harlem Line to replace track switches north of Hartsdale Station. These track switches allow trains to be switched between the 2 tracks on the line. These track switches are at the end of their expected service life and require replacement. Once completed, this project will increase service reliability. In order to get this work done, however, it requires trains to single track between Scarsdale and North White Plains Station. We accomplished similar track work last year near Scarsdale when ridership was low due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the project can be completed in less time. By advancing this project now, when we're running less service, train service between Scarsdale and North White Plains will be reduced to 1 track in both directions for the duration of the project, as opposed to weekends only. As a result, more work can be done on weekdays, which will decrease overnight work as well as the duration of the overall project from approximately 20 weeks to 12 weeks. Tomorrow on Earth Day, I'll be at Southeast Station as part of MTA's 10th Mask Force event, and I'll be joined there by Commissioner Zuckerman, State Senator Pete Harckham, and Town Supervisor Tony Hay to distribute free reusable masks to our customers. Meanwhile, our safety superhero Metro Man will be at Grand Central along with the chairman, handing out masks, and we'll have staff and volunteers also distributing masks at Beacon, White Plains, and Fordham stations. Speaking of Metro Man, I just wanted to advise the board that we recently received a grant from the FRA of $75,000 to fund the expansion of our safety education and community outreach program tracks. This funding will go towards 3 existing initiatives related to trespassers and suicide prevention. Finally, I would like to report that we have recently filled our position of Vice President of System Safety. Clyde Armstrong brings 30 years of passenger and freight railroad experience to this important agency position. For the past 9 years, Clyde has served as Metro-North's Director of Regulatory Oversight, representing the railroad in legislative, regulatory, and rail industry forums, and providing guidance regarding the interpretation and application of federal and state regulations and instructions. In closing, I'd like to note that final review of Metro-North's 2020 operating budget results and our annual ridership report are in the agenda materials. We have no procurements or other action items this month. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kathy. Questions for Kathy? All right, good. Thanks very much, Kathy. Phil, if you would report on Long Island Railroad, please.
Thank you, Pat. Good afternoon, everyone. As you noted, on Monday, we gathered in beautiful Oyster Bay and announced our product test agreement with Alstom to analyze and perform simulations of our operations to validate that battery electric multiple units, BEMU, can be used safely. This analysis includes operating on both our Oyster Bay and Port Jefferson branches. And over the next 8 months, we will analyze the feasibility to retrofit our M7 electric cars, adding battery power that would allow it to run in our non-electric territories and seamlessly switch to third rail power in our other territories. This goes hand in hand with the state's environmental mandates and the MTA's commitment to help achieve these goals. For the Long Island Railroad, this is our commitment to leave no stone unturned as we look to address the many requests I've heard to electrify branches and improve service. Understanding that the billions of dollars needed to electrify would span across multiple capital programs, we wanted to challenge ourselves and industry to find a better way. Battery technology has been used in Europe and Asia and has advanced significantly. We believe now is the time to make it work for Long Island. The potential for this greener, cleaner, quieter, and more cost-effective solution is both exciting and transformational. Upon successful completion of this first phase, we would provide to Alstom one married pair of M7 cars to build out a prototype test train to run on the Oyster Bay branch, with the ultimate goal of running train service direct to our western terminals, including the future Grand Central Terminal. I want the board to know that we've been working hard to find solutions that can help our customers across our entire system, including those on Oyster Bay, Port Jefferson, Greenport, and Montauk branches. This will shape future capital needs and decisions, including rolling stock procurements. This battery train is another example of our approach to tackle longstanding issues, continually pushing the envelope, working with industry to overcome challenges, embracing technology and innovation to move Long Island Railroad forward. I'm optimistic that the Alstom team, in partnership with Long Island Railroad, can overcome obstacles, find solutions to make it work for us and the public that we serve. And as we look towards the future, we've not lost sight of our ongoing battle against COVID. Keeping our customers and employees safe will always be our top priority. So I'm pleased to congratulate the team that helped get our employee vaccination site up and running at Jamaica's Central Control Building. Thanks to Pat Warren, Daria Luisi, Laurie Ebenhausing, and Janine Mem, and all the MTA and Long Island Railroad staff from corporate safety, government affairs, operations, facilities, security, IT, human resources, and Long Island Railroad department heads who have worked nonstop to ensure that all the logistics and scheduling are well coordinated with our operational needs. And last but certainly not least, thank you to our partners in labor for their support as we share a common goal. I cannot thank everyone enough for this life-saving effort. It's a true all-hands-on-deck effort. And to date, as a result, we're at nearly 44% of our employees have gotten at least one shot. And that is vital to our incredible employees who have been doing important work throughout this pandemic, delivering essential service for those who rely on us. Having this vaccination hub in Jamaica brings us one step closer to helping us to help Long Island and New York beat this pandemic. It's literally one big shot in the arm. In the book is the year-end finance report, as well as the annual ridership report. After providing a record 91.1 million rides in 2019, in 2020, due to the pandemic, overall ridership was 33% of pre-pandemic trips. Non-commutation fared better than commutation rides. And on a more positive note, over the last few weeks, we have seen an increase in returning riders, now at 28% of our pre-pandemic weekday trips, the highest since the beginning of the pandemic. Weekends remain stronger, fluctuating between 40 to 50% of ridership. So we look forward to warmer weather and more vaccinated people, businesses reopening and capacity expanding. We want everyone to know that the railroad is the safest, best way to get around. And whether you're going out to the East End for some beach time, visiting wineries, visiting local downtowns, rooting for the home team in person, or heading into the city to enjoy museums and restaurants and all the culture that it holds, we're here for you and looking forward to welcoming more and more riders, families, and friends back to the rails. There is light at the end of this tunnel. And as I encourage riders to return, they should know that we have not lost sight of the importance of protecting our infrastructure to better ensure a safe and reliable ride. We have a busy spring ahead of us as we support ongoing capital projects and perform vital state of good repair work. Over the next 2 weekends, we'll be installing switches at Queens Interlocking. These switches will enhance our service today and support us once the mainline third track project and Elmont Station work is complete. On 2 weekends in May, we'll be installing another vital switch, improving service at Valley Interlocking and Valley Stream. And all of this state of good repair work is improving our operational flexibility, reliability, and driving on-time performance up as our customers expect and as they deserve. Our operations and transportation staff will attest to the value of this work as our operating performance continues on a positive trend. In March, Long Island Railroad trains operated at 95.1% on time, exceeding our goal of 94%. And so far for the year, we're performing better than we did last year. Our on-time metrics so far for 2021 are just above 96%, an increase of 1.6 percentage points over the same period last year, which was our highest recorded performance in modern day history still. The railroad has never been safer, cleaner, and reliable than it is today. Our commitment to the public and my commitment to the workforce is that we're going to continue to focus on what gives us the best chance to succeed and better serve the riding public. We will continue to strive to be the world-class rail service that Long Island deserves. From the new Moynihan train hall to our east end of Long Island, including the non-powered territory, Oyster Bay, Ronkonkoma, Montauk, and Port Jefferson branches. We're all getting more hopeful by the day as the vaccine rollout continues and New York begins to open up more and more. So let's all stick to caring for one another, practicing safety, wearing masks in public and on trains, and perhaps most importantly, getting the vaccine when you're able to do so. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. Ride the train. Long Island Railroad has no procurements this month, Chairman.
Thank you, Phil. Any questions for Phil? Thank you. Sarah?
Sure. Just a couple of quick remarks. First of all, as we see ridership come back, a huge thank you to the New York City Transit workforce who have made that happen. Yesterday, we hit a new high on subways, 2,079,449 riders. So grateful to the workforce for making that happen. Again, on mask usage, we continue to see very good numbers, 97%, 98%. Of course, not all those folks are wearing masks properly, so we need people to continue to do that. As others have said, we have Mask Force on Thursday, so if anyone on the board would like to join us, we'd be grateful to have you with us. I think we've had a few of you in the past. Would love to have more of you. I want to thank Sarah Meyer and James Rubin and her team and their teams for their great work on the customer survey that many of you have been briefed on and have read more about over the last week. I want to give a thank you and thank Al Petray for his great service over many years. As the chairman noted, he'll be retiring shortly and we'll miss his service. And I also want to acknowledge that Ken Mooney, who is the head engineer at Maintenance of Way, has retired after 46 years of service. A wonderful colleague, and we will certainly miss him. There's been some conversation about overtime. I wanted to just address that briefly. We've continued to be focused on decreasing overtime and being less dependent on it. One important thing that we've done internally at New York City Transit is try to address this issue of the fact that so much of overtime tracking and approvals happen on paper, which is obviously hugely problematic for many reasons, including it makes it very hard to track in real time, and you're on a constant lag on how you're doing. And so we have built a online overtime approval form that we've been rolling out throughout New York City Transit. It's getting good pickup in our maintenance of way in our stations divisions, and we're rolling it out more widely. And then and for many departments that are using it, we are sort of forcing them into it by May 1st. So we've got a lot of folks using it, but not using it enough. And so we're forcing that on May 1st as a bit of a drop dead date, which I think will help bring others in. And that gives us, again, the ability to sort of track overtime use in real time. Additionally, we see a lot of managers in departments using the overtime dashboard, which we have pushed out across the agency as a really important tool that assists in tracking how your department is doing. So I'm grateful to the men and women of New York City Transit for continuing to use that. I think everything else I was going to talk about has sort of been talked about to death at this point, so happy to take questions, but those are the highlights. And again, my huge thanks to the workforce for their great work over the last couple of months, getting us to this new ridership high, and of course, continued on-time performance metrics. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Questions for Sarah? All right, good. I'm going to turn to Jano on a C&D procurement item from the Joint Railroad and New York City Transit Committees.
Okay. C&D has one procurement action totaling approximately $7.6 million being brought through the MNR and Long Island Railroad Joint Committee this month. The item requests board ratification of a modification to the East Side Access Systems contract with Tudor Perini for the redesign and relocation of equipment and devices for 5 systems, a 4-month extension to the substantial completion date, and payment for impact costs. The punchline is this is being funded by JP Morgan Chase, so I'll keep going. This modification supports the redevelopment of the building at 270 Park Avenue by JP Morgan Chase and is required as a result of the developer's construction of shear walls to support its new building that passes right through the Grand Central Terminal concourse that we are constructing for East Side Access. This mod totals approximately $7.6 million and includes an acceleration incentive payment of $955,000, which the contractor can earn by meeting the new substantial completion date. Pursuant to its cost reimbursement agreement with MTA, J.P. Morgan Chase, through its 270 Park headquarters development project, is responsible and will reimburse MTA for all the direct costs of this modification and for the impact costs and acceleration incentive for the delays attributable to JPMC. I submit the procurement action to the board for approval.
I move it. Do I have a second?
Yes, Pat, second.
Thank you, Kevin. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstention? The matter carries. Jano, back to you.
C&D has a procurement action being brought through Transit and Bus Committee for approval this month. The item requests board approval to award a publicly advertised and competitively solicited personal services contract for project and construction management services to Nate Consulting Group for a not-to-exceed price of $26.67 million. Under this contract, Nate will coordinate, manage, and oversee the various MTA and developer projects that affect MTA facilities within the 42nd Street corridor. That includes all the developer work that goes on in and around Grand Central, as well as the 6th Avenue Bryant Park project and the Times Square shuttle and related Times Square projects, all of which we group together in what we call the 42nd Street corridor project. And these facilities are being managed in order to by NAIC in order to manage project costs and schedule, reduce inconvenience to MTA customers during construction, and coordinate customer communications. I submit the procurement action to the board for approval.
I move it. Do I have a second?
Second, Pat.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? The matter carries. Thank you, Jenna. Danny, over to you for bridges and tunnels.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. As the weather is starting to warm up, I'd like to express my gratitude to the B&T workforce for their performance over the past winter. During many snowstorms and other inclement weather events, our operations and maintenance personnel efficiently cleared snow and kept our facilities safe for customers throughout. So thank you all for your outstanding efforts. To touch on B&T's traffic, we continue to recover from the impacts of COVID-19, but we're still below pre-pandemic levels. While our traffic was 29% higher of March 2021 compared to March of 2020, it is still approximately 11% lower than in March of 2019. In B&T's 2020 year-end report is included in this month's board materials. Some highlights: total support to mass transit was $830 million, which was $281 million above final estimates. These results were primarily due to higher traffic volumes above forecast. B&T also effectively controlled its costs in 2020, and one notable area is overtime, which was below both the budget and forecast levels, primarily due to scheduling and management efficiencies. On the COVID-19 mitigation front, B&T is committed in continuing to keep our employees as safe as possible as we continue to follow ongoing efforts to reduce density, wearing masks, and getting screened. I'm also happy to report, as of today, approximately 50% of employees who work at B&T have been vaccinated, receiving at least one dose. And we continue to provide the latest information to employees on the virus and vaccination efforts. And finally, a scheduled toll increase on MTA B&T crossings started on April 11th. To help customers pay the lowest toll rates, B&T created a 1-minute, I swear it's a 1-minute video with the MTA digital team that I'd like to share with you now. It shows how customers can use the Tolls in New York smartphone app to easily get Easy Pass tags and how to properly mount them on their windshields.
Request tags and strips on Tolls NY. If you have a New York Easy Pass account, make sure you continue to pay the lowest toll rate by properly mounting your Easy Pass tag to the inside of your windshield. If you don't mount your tag, you may be paying more than you should. Need extra adhesive strips or need another Easy Pass tag for a new vehicle? You can quickly and easily request these through the Tolls NY app. Open the Tolls NY app and go to My Account. Select Tags. Select Request Tags if you got a new vehicle or just need another tag. No deposit required if your account is on auto pay. A $10 tag deposit is required for other pay types. Need to order new strips? Select Request Supplies to request an adhesive strip set for your windshield. Please ensure your Easy Pass tag is properly mounted to your windshield in order to pay the lowest toll rate. Tolls NY makes getting the lowest rates with EasyPass easy. Need the app? Get it for free at the Apple App Store and Google Play.
Thank you. And as I mentioned in last month's meeting with the Tolls in New York app, customers can manage their accounts to ensure they are paying the lowest toll rates. And with that, Mr. Chairman, there are no Bridge and Tunnel Board procurements this month, and this concludes my remarks.
So Danny, thank you for the video, which I believe will be a big hit on TikTok. Any questions for Danny? Thank you, Danny. I'm now going to turn to Finance Committee matters and ask David Keller to take us through the materials. David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start very quickly with Budget Watch. Budget Watch is for March results of operations and April subsidies. Farebox revenue was $264 million favorable year to date, or 97%. For the month of March, Farebox revenue was favorable by $110 million, or 115%. As we've noted previously, this variance is against the adopted budget, which is based on the McKinsey worst-case scenario. The worst case was used in the financial plan to minimize downside risk with the hope of better results. Through the first 3 months of the year, Farebox revenue has been closer to the midpoint range between the worst case and the best case scenarios. Please understand the best case scenario is still well below the pre-COVID revenues. We continue to watch financial results closely, and forecasts will be revised accordingly in the July plan. With regard to toll revenue was $173 million favorable year to date, or 70%. And for the month of March, toll revenue was favorable by $72 million, or 78%. The adopted budget for toll revenue reflects the midpoint between the McKinsey best case and worst case scenarios for toll revenue for 3 of the past 4 months, with February being the exception due to the impact of significant snowfall on traffic. B&T toll revenue has surpassed the best case scenario. Again, understanding the best case scenario is still below the pre-COVID levels, and we will be watching this as we are doing with Farebox revenue, and we'll adjust the July plan accordingly. As I noted, Farebox revenues are still significantly below pre-pandemic levels compared to the first 3 months of 2019, with Farebox revenue is down $521 million, or 63%, and toll revenue is down $32 million, or 7%. With stay-at-home orders having gone into effect in mid-March of last year, the first quarter of 2019 is the more appropriate comparative period rather than the first quarter of 2020. Moving on to expenses. Expenses were $258 million favorable year to date, or 7%. 70% of the favorable variance is timing related, with the remainder attributable to continuing the loosened hiring restrictions, lower electric power and fuel consumption and rates, and lower paratransit service contract expense due to trip usage. Adjusting for the timing related items, year to date expenses are about $75 million, or 2% favorable. Overtime, which is part of labor expenses, was $6 million unfavorable year to date, or 3%. New York City Transit was $17 million, or 12% unfavorable, primarily due to weather-related needs in response to the significant snowfall in February and for vacancy and absentee coverage. All other agencies were favorable year to date through March. Debt service was $28 million favorable year to date, or 4%, reflecting timing of debt issuance and lower than budgeted variable rates. Moving on to subsidies, which again are through April. Subsidies were $311 million favorable year to date, or 24%, on the strength of the real estate transaction taxes, the payroll mobility tax, and MMTOA. Regarding the real estate taxes, they were $124 million favorable year to date, or 61%. Just over 80% of the favorable result is from the MRT, and that's mostly in the suburban counties. MMTOA was $61 million, or 19% favorable, and that reflects the additional payment of $61 million in April from the prior state fiscal year that the MTA had recognized as a shortfall in the February financial plan. That's something that Bob had mentioned earlier in his comments. Other dedicated taxes on a year-to-date basis, the PMT was $139 million favorable, or 32%. The petroleum business tax was $13 million favorable, or 7%. MTA aid was $8 million favorable, or 16%. The for-hire vehicle surcharge was $35 million unfavorable, which is 40% down. The mansion tax was $19 million favorable, 41%, and the Internet Marketplace sales tax was $17 million favorable, or 15%. Please note that the $37 million increase combined in the mansion tax and the Internet Marketplace sales tax with the 2021 budget amounts are now being recommitted to the 20 to 24 capital program, not the operating budget. And the net effect of that change is a $211 million decrease in budget operating subsidies year to date. And that concludes Budget Watch, and I'll pause before I move on to the agenda.
Thank you, David. Questions for David on that? All right, good.
Okay, there are no action items for finance. Next, we have 3 informational items. The first is the annual report on variable rate debt. Pat McCoy is here to present that and answer any questions and provide an update on ratings. Pat?
Thank you, David. I first want to report on our transaction yesterday, which was a successful pricing and marketing of $1.25 billion of inaugural TBTA payroll mobility tax bonds. 990 million were offered as tax-exempt bonds, and 249 million were offered as federally taxable bonds due to the use of proceeds. We received over $6 billion in orders from over 100 institutional investors for the bonds offered. And as a result, we were able to lower yields by as much as 15 basis points for certain maturities from the preliminary pricing. The bonds will generate $1.43 billion of proceeds to retire $800 million of transportation revenue bond anticipation notes, which are due on May 15th, and also to refund the $638 million outstanding federal RIF loan entered into with respect to the PTC project. MTA was successful in receiving AA+ ratings from Standard & Poor's, Fitch, and Kroll ratings, which are equivalent to New York State's general obligation bonds. Yields achieved on the bonds were extremely favorable, and we were able to capture an interest cost equivalent to the highest rated tax-backed bonds in the state. Final yields on the tax-exempt bonds ranged from 0.32% in 3 years to 1.84% in 30 years. The taxable bonds range from 2.26% in 12 years to 2.92% in 19 years. The true interest cost of the transaction is 2.82% with an arbitrage yield on the tax-exempt bonds of 1.6%. And this transaction will close on May 5th. I also want to report that Moody's and Standard & Poor's have issued improved outlooks for the transportation revenue credit, improving their outlook from negative to stable. And just to remind you, Moody's rates the TRB bonds as A3 and S&P rates those bonds as BBB+. And then lastly, I just want to note that you will find in the Finance Committee exhibit book on Director's desk the annual report on MTA's variable rate debt portfolio, and be happy to take any questions on that now or down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Pat. Any questions for Pat on yesterday's deal or any other issue? All right, good. David, you don't have anything else, do you?
No, Mr. Chairman, there are no procurements this month.
Okay, good. Thanks very much. I'm going to ask David Florio to please introduce the real estate items.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Real Estate has 6 action items for consideration and approval. For New York City Transit, there are 3 lease agreements with Breezy Point LLC for retail uses in 3 locations at the Stowell Avenue Terminal in Brooklyn. There are 3 actions for Metro North Railroad. The first is an easement granted to the City of Beacon for a new pump station that supports the Beacon commuter parking facility. Next is the acquisition of easements from 2 property holders in the Bronx to be used for a substation in support of Metro North Penn Station access. The third and final item is an easement agreement granted to an adjacent property owner, the Kathleen Cullen Trust, for ingress, egress utilities and parking in New Hamburg. There are, in addition, information items. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding any of the foregoing, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, David. Any questions for David on either the easements or the information items? All right, with that, I'll make a motion to approve the real estate items. Could I have a second, please? All in favor? Any opposed or abstained? The matters carry. With that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting. I'll move it. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Thanks, everybody. We will see you. Thanks for your patience, and we will see you next month. And look forward to meeting in person as soon as health authorities approve that. Thanks, everybody. Let me start with two observations and then happy to take your questions. One is Jano Lieber presented today a compelling opportunity for one of the most maligned transportation properties in the country, which is Penn Station. The vision is compelling. It will have substantial transportation benefits for Long Island Railroad customers, Metro North customers, subway customers, as well as commuters on New Jersey Transit and those traveling from Boston and Washington and other places on Amtrak. Obviously, no decision is close to being made, but a compelling opportunity and the beginning of a serious public discussion about the options for Penn Station. Incredibly exciting vision, especially for those of us who commute into and out of Penn Station on a daily basis. Let me just address the dialogue on the crime issue that we had this morning. So a couple of things. One is ridership is increasing. It's increasing on subways and buses. It's increasing at a slower rate on Metro North than Long Island Railroad. Sarah Feinberg reported breaking the 2 million customer barrier on subways, and subway ridership continues to increase. Bus ridership's been over 1 million for some period of time, and obviously we're still significantly below pre-pandemic levels, but the fact that ridership is increasing is a great thing for New York and a great thing for the MTA. Point two is the subways are safe, and they're dramatically safer than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago in the bad old days. We've looked at the major index crimes, March of 21, March of 19, March of 2015. And on a adjusted ridership basis, for the fact that ridership is down dramatically, the total of those crimes on an adjusted basis is up. It's up 2021 compared to 2015, and it's up 2021 compared to 2019. It is critical that the statistics be adjusted for ridership. We conducted a survey, as we do regularly. Sarah Feinberg talked about the results of the survey, about 33,000 customers, significant number. 25,000 of them current riders, additional 8 lapsed riders, if that's the right term, 33,000 customers in total, and 75% of them told us that they are concerned about crime and harassment. And obviously, and the following comment is not a criticism of the NYPD at all. Obviously, the NYPD data doesn't track harassment, but harassment is a real thing for our employees and for our customers. And the number of, for instance, spitting incidents with respect to, which is reprehensible with respect to transit workers, is up. And we have an obligation to provide a safe and secure environment for our customers. On the camera issue, we installed a record number of cameras last year, not quite 1,000. The overwhelming majority of those on New York City Transit, some on the commuter rails. We expect to do even more cameras this year, and that work has been underway for some time, and we've got sufficient capital to make that investment. It's not a question of funding at all. And with those two initial observations, I'm happy to take questions.
And first up today is Dan Reveille from New York One. Good afternoon, Dan.
Good afternoon. Can the MTA work with the NYPD on this issue of crime to release a fuller set of stats that the NYPD puts out on its own, delayed, that covers a bigger universe of criminal actions such as weapons possession, harassment, misdemeanor assaults, and the like? How can we get as good as those major felony stats, but for other areas of criminal activity that happens in the subway?
So Dan, that's a good question. We've been asking for that data. Let me start with the following. The relationship with the NYPD and the new leadership, as well as the old leadership of the Transit Bureau of the NYPD, is a good one. The relationship with the NYPD rank and file and leadership, the commissioner and Chief O'Reilly is a good one. Of course, we'll be working with the NYPD on getting additional data, and those conversations are underway. And the more information that we've got and are able to share back and forth, the better off our customers and employees will be.
And we move on to a first-time participant. First time ever at one of these proceedings. Samantha Liebman from 1010 Wins Radio. Samantha, you're up.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Welcome.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I've been in person, but not on Zoom. I just wanted to know, there was a lot of concern because a lot of the harassment and the spitting and all of these incidents in terms of safety, many of them are because of people with mental health issues. So I know that, there was an initiative before the pandemic to help, with outreach. And how is that going? And is that going to maybe, besides police, is that going to be upped at all?
Well, look, the harassment and the spitting is reprehensible and unacceptable and illegal, whether it is from someone who's emotionally disturbed or not. It doesn't matter. I will put a plug in for a piece of legislation in Albany that would increase the penalties for instance, spitting on a transit worker or otherwise assaulting a transit worker in that way. And we're hopeful that the legislature, having completed the budget, will take on that piece of legislation. The MTA fully supports it, as does obviously the unions that represent transit workers, subways, buses, commuter rails, et cetera. That's really important. So whether those attacks, spitting, it doesn't matter who does it. Responsibility for the homeless on city streets and in the subways is the responsibility of the city of New York. We work closely with the NYPD and with Commissioner Banks of the Homeless Services Department of the city of New York. There's a focus, for instance, on Penn Station, where, as I mentioned, I commute in and out every day, and I think that focus is important. There's additional work to do, but I think that cooperation, ongoing and even heightened cooperation will benefit our customers and our employees.
And next we're going to go to Streets Blog's own Dave Colon. He's got the Knicks. They're in 5th place, playoff position, and his beloved Mets, you share this, Pat, in 1st place. So we're going to go right to Dave.
7-5, and I attribute that in no small way to the work of Phil Eng and I on opening day, and Dave Colon was with us.
I don't think you're wrong, and that's right. Mets are in 1st place.
First place.
I wanted to ask about we got our first big congestion pricing update today, the first one since the federal government gave the environmental assessment guidance, but there wasn't a lot there in terms of what is going to be happening with it. I mean, can you give us what the timeline is going to be on this environmental assessment if the government is asking for what they call robust outreach for 2 other states? I know that there was a point where the MTA had suggested to the feds that this could be done in somewhere around 3 to 4 months, which I guess is not the timeline right now. So what is the timeline? When are we going to get one for all the various steps that are taking place?
So Dave, the good news is we've gone from a total stop under the prior administration where the congestion pricing process was just came to a complete halt. In the first days of the Biden administration and the first days of the Secretary Buttigieg, his term, they have given us the guidance we want. It's an environmental assessment with public outreach. There have been meetings and calls with staff at the MTA, New York City, New York State, as well as U.S. DOT. I'm not going to speak to a deadline, but I think we're really encouraged. We're really encouraged by the fact that they've given us the direction in terms of environmental assessment and public outreach, and we'll be reporting on progress going forward.
And next up today is Danielle Moyo of Politico, coming to us live and direct. Danielle, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask about cleaning. The federal government recently released new guidance stating the risk of contracting COVID from surfaces is about 1 in 10,000. When I asked the MTA about this a few weeks ago, you said you would talk to federal partners about whether or not to change cleaning patterns. So who did you speak with? What came from that? And when will 24-hour service resume in light of that guidance?
Well, Danielle, we're going to continue the cleaning regime. We're obviously aware of the CDC guidelines. The CDC has not said that there's no transmission from touching a surface. We've all known for some period of time that aerosols is the primary mode of transmission of COVID-19. The comfort that it provides to our riders and frankly to our employees is important, especially at a time where we want to go from 2 million customers weekday on subways to 3 million and 3.5 and 4 on the way to 5 and 5.5, which is the pre-pandemic level. We are going to ask FEMA for reimbursement, and we look forward to bringing 24/7 service back. As in the near term.
And moving on next to Paul Berger, hanging out in the neighborhood there of the Wall Street Journal. Paul.
Thank you. Hi, Pat. Can you hear me?
Hi, Paul.
Hi. I was just wondering, during the discussion in the meeting today, you mentioned harassment at Penn Station. You obviously commute through there, so I was wondering, is this, when you said there's obviously an issue with harassment there, is that something you've experienced or seen yourself? And if not, then how do you know it's an issue there?
Well, Paul, first of all, harassment, given the fact that 75% of our customers surveyed said crime and harassment is an issue. It's not peculiar to Penn Station. I'm in Penn Station a couple of times a day, at 7 o'clock this morning. Yes, there is harassment. There are, men and women who appear to be emotionally disturbed. That's not peculiar or only happening at Penn Station. And the survey of, 33,000, 25,000 of whom are current riders on MTA services are reporting the same thing. We understand that the NYPD's crime data doesn't include harassment data, nor should it. But yes, it's an issue, and our customers think it's an issue, as do our employees.
Okay.
Hey, Pat, I would just add one thing,
Please,
which
Sarah.
is that in the customer survey, we give people the opportunity to talk to us about specific stations, specific experiences, specific concerns, and we got a significant number about Penn Station.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay. And if I have time for a follow-up, just on a related issue about the CCTV cameras, could you just tell us a little bit about how many there already are in the system and how many you believe you need in order to have system-wide coverage?
So Paul, I don't have the number at my fingertips. We'll come back to you on that.
And now we go to the Eastern District, where Alfonso Castillo of Newsday is standing by. Alfonso.
Hi, Tim. Hi, Chairman. So I wanted to ask you about overtime. Last week, the Empire Center issued their annual payroll report for the MTA. This is the report that a couple years ago led to all the investigations and scrutiny into overtime. They acknowledge that it's down quite a bit from last year and down even further from 2018, but they still point at some potential red flags. More than 400 employees making more than $100,000 in overtime, nearly 700 of them more than doubling their salaries, and at least 19 workers getting more than $200,000 in overtime. And obviously there's a lot of concentration on the Long Island Railroad in these figures. So given all that, I mean, I'd ask you what your take is on the report, and do these numbers show that there is still very much a problem that needs to be addressed?
So a couple things. One is, I'll note, Alfonso, that first of all, thank you for the acknowledgement that we've cut overtime in a couple of years by a couple $100 million, which is a real number. One, two, we disclosed the information before the Empire Center did, and that's going to be our practice going forward. Three, there is a concentration of high overtime earners. We are focused at the Long Island Railroad and every agency in reviewing that, looking at the high earners. That's been the case for some period of time, and I know, for instance, at the Long Island Railroad, which is obviously of special interest to Phil and his team are very focused on it. I think the headline here is we've reduced overtime by a couple of $100 million down 2 consecutive years for the first time in some period of time, and we're going to continue to be focused on controlling overtime and making sure that it's authorized and worked.
Hang on, Alfonso, got to unmute you on that follow-up.
Sorry, thanks for that. Really quick. You mentioned the high earners. I know that the MTA is taking a special look at them, even refer to them as, I think, high rollers. But do numbers that are really high necessarily indicate a problem, or could you have somebody who's making more than $200,000 in overtime and it's completely legitimate?
Yeah, of course. Look, most overtime we believe is authorized and earned. In the relatively small number of cases where that's not the case, there are some prosecutions underway for a small number of employees of whom it is alleged that they violated the rules. The overtime at the Long Island Railroad, for instance, is affected by significant amount of capital work going on. East Side Access, third track, second track, which is now completed, but lots of work going on. And frankly, the provisions of collective bargaining agreements.
And we move on now to Bloomberg's own Michelle Caskey out there. Michelle, you're up.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this presser. I wanted to ask again about potential fare hikes that were, as you know, delayed from earlier this year. Just wondering what's the latest with that. To the best of my knowledge, if I'm not mistaken, if you delay it too long, you might have to again conduct all those public meetings all over again. So is there a push to actually implement the fare hikes before you reach that deadline?
So Michelle, the board will consider fare hikes at a public meeting. Board action is required before any fares are increased. We're obviously aware of the limit on the viability, if you will, of the public hearing process, and we don't want to overstay our welcome on that, and we'll be coming back to the board and the public in the future.
But how much time do you have?
Look, that's fundamentally a legal question, and I'll leave that one to the lawyers, but we believe that the public hearing process that we went through is viable today and will remain viable for some period of time.
Thank you.
And next up is David Meyer of the New York Post, who tweeted he was going to come from an undisclosed location, so we're not going to get into that. David, go.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Pat, I'm sorry to just go back to subway crime since I know we've talked a lot about it, but I'm hoping you could respond directly to the mayor's criticism last week that the MTA, speaking about public fears of crime and harassment, was discouraging riders to return from the system, especially given the fact that the number of crimes per million riders actually dropped February to March. I'm wondering if you're not promoting those types of stats after already adding 600 cops to the system, and what message you would want to give to riders who maybe have read stories in the newspaper about crime or heard secondhand stories from their friends who are riding about certain types of people in the train. What message would you give to them as they're considering to come back?
So here's the message: ridership's increasing. That's good for. It's good for everybody. It's good for the MTA. It's good for New York. It's good for other customers. It's good for employees. That's a positive, and we expect ridership to continue and to increase on subways and buses and Metro North and Long Island Railroad. That's one. Two is the subways are safe, and they're safer than they were 15 or 20 or 25 years ago. Significantly safer. There is crime on the subway and harassment, and 75% of the people surveyed say that. Harassment's not captured by criminal data compiled by any police department, but it is real, and our employees and our customers feel it. But the message is that the subway is safe. We have an obligation to provide a safe and secure environment to our customers and to our employees, and we're going to do everything we can to achieve that goal, and that includes working closely with the NYPD and Chief O'Reilly and the MTA Police and the City Department of Homeless Services, et cetera.
And we move on to Steve Burns of CBS 880. Steve, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good to see everyone here. I have something of an esoteric question, so I hope I explain it correctly. I'm sensing kind of a common thread here that we're responding to rider perceptions, whether they're accurate or not. We had the essentially admission that crime is not rampant in the subway, but the perception is that it is rampant. We know that catching the virus on surfaces is highly unlikely, yet we're still responding to that possibility. At what point does it become counterproductive to facilitate these maybe misinformed perceptions instead of pushing back against them and saying, we may feel like crime is up, but it's actually not a big problem. We may feel like we can catch the virus on a surface, but it's actually highly unlikely. Why continue facilitating these perceptions instead of pushing back against them?
Steve, your premise is incorrect. With respect to crime, if you look at the crime data for March of 21 and compare it to March of 2019 and 2015, on a ridership adjusted basis, the 6 major index crimes are up substantially on a ridership adjusted basis. That is real. We run a business where we carry millions of people, and like any business, the views and perspectives of our customers with respect to crime and harassment is a vitally important thing for us to know. That's why one of many reasons that we conduct the survey. So the reality is, on a ridership adjusted basis, crime is up. Having said that, the subways are safe, the buses are safe to ride, and all of us here do, and our families do. And so, A, it's reality, but B, the perceptions of our customers, and 33,000 customers is a lot of customers, right? It wasn't a survey or a poll of 100 or 1,000 people. That's a substantial number of customers who went to the trouble of responding. So it's both A, reality, and B, the perceptions of our customers is important.
And next up, representing the New York Daily News, Clayton Gusa. Clayton, good afternoon.
Hey, Pat. I got 2 questions. The first one's on just kind of looking at what you guys are moving on in terms of greenhouse emissions, given the President Biden's plan or vow to slash emissions in half by 2030. I know your guys' plan is to convert your entire bus fleet to all electric by 2040. Is that fast enough? And I know, and a majority of the buses that you have allocated in the current capital plan are not electric. You just put out a procurement for 50 electric buses or 45 electric buses, but 50 diesels. So if you're still buying hundreds of electric buses, are you still in line with President Biden's goal of slashing greenhouse emissions in half in 10 years? And will you consider shifting the capital program around so that you are leaning more into electric vehicles? I have one more question.
So it's an excellent question, and President Biden's leadership on the electric bus and electric vehicle issue in general will accelerate the point at which we will be able to buy additional electric vehicle buses, right? Right now, there are capacity issues. With respect to the investment that the administration, the federal administration, expects to make in electric vehicles, I think it's fair to say that there will be a dramatic increase in the producers of electric cars, but also electric buses. And I think the president's focus on this and commitment to this will coincide with the MTA's desire to move to an all-electric fleet as early as possible. So good news for customers, good news for everybody in New York, employees included.
Then when it comes to your CCTV rollout, you've listed that you had almost 1,000 new cameras in the system last year. This year, you're looking to up that number. Now, are those CCTV cameras? Are those closed circuit television cameras that can be monitored in real time? Or are they other kinds of cameras that you can go and look at and pick up feeds from as police do investigations?
CCTV, yes, Clayton.
All of them?
Almost all of them.
Okay.
And the next question is from Ben Kabak of 2nd Avenue Sagas. There was a saga over there today, but it had nothing to do with transit. Go ahead, Ben.
Thanks, Tim. So just to go back to the comment, Pat, about the perception of harassment, and I don't want to discount what riders are feeling. I think it's important to make them feel welcome in the system, especially if you're trying to grow the ridership. But what exactly is the plan here to combat both the actual harassment and the perception of harassment, so that I think the conversation shifts from this focus on perception and harassment to the concrete actions that are being taken to make the system feel more inviting for riders as you welcome more of them back into the system?
Yeah, but Ben, let's do this. Harassment is a part of it. The first part to start with is crime, right? And as I said, if you look at the data for March of this year compared to March of 2019 and March of 2015, and you do so on a ridership adjusted basis, the 6 index crimes are up. System is safe. It is safer. The subway system and New York in general is safer than it was 15 or 20 or 25 years ago. But on a ridership adjusted basis, which is the reality our customers have to deal with, those crimes are up. System is safe. With respect to the harassment question, that is something that is real. It is not just a question of perception. And 75% of those who responded to the survey cited crime and harassment as a major concern, and also said that when they saw a police officer on a subway platform or a train, they felt, not surprisingly, comforted.
And then just as a quick follow-up, when does the MTA expect to reach that 3 million ridership figure? You mentioned, I know we just hit 2 million and maybe we're not acknowledging that sufficiently, but when do you want to reach 3 million? When do you expect to?
Look, the hope we all have is as soon as possible. I'm not going to make a date up, but clearly we've broken the 2 million barrier, and we expect as the city and the region recover, that ridership is going to go up. I'm not going to throw a date out there.
And Pat, just one point on that. I think people may have missed it, but we announced in my remarks today that we've hit another subway high, which is 2,079,000. So, which is the highest post-pandemic. So we're continuing to chip away at it.
Yep. Thanks, sir.
All right. Has anybody seen Bob Foran? Bob Foran anywhere? Because next is Paul Burton of the Bond Buyer. Paul.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Pat. We might not need Bob for this one. I'll throw it out to you, Pat. Regarding the Penn Station project, some transit groups are calling for commuter rail through running capabilities, for example, Queens or Long Island out to New Jersey. It is a little bit ambitious, but might we see the day where, for example, somebody could go to a Mets game in the afternoon and then take a train out to the New Jersey Meadowlands for a football game at night?
I think we should have been looking for Jano Lieber for that.
The answer to the question is the study that's been done of the with Amtrak and New Jersey Transit, all the work that's been done assumes that we have to preserve the opportunity to grow through running. So the engineering and the planning does allow for that, and in fact facilitates it at future times. But just so everybody understands, through running concept depends in part on widening platforms, and so because you would have trains simultaneously loading and unloading at a central location, and that in the estimate of the professionals would require tearing up some of the, for example, some of the work done at Moynihan Station, or because the platforms would have to be relocated, track relocations, and we would also need to really have meaningful through-running increases, more East River tunnel capacity. Right now, the East River tunnels are full. So with Long Island Railroad, soon to be Metro North, Amtrak, and New Jersey Transit trains that deadhead out to Sunnyside. So if you're going to do more through running, we need new tunnels under the East River. Now we're just still talking about getting those Hudson River tunnels for Gateway. So that's a future going plan as well. So through running, yes, planning for it, but right now we need to fix Penn Station and make sure we can accommodate the Gateway traffic that's coming with those new tunnels from New Jersey.
Thank you.
And to wrap up today's proceedings from the media wing of the MTA is Steve Nesson of WNYC and the Gothamist. Steve, take us home.
Hey there, Chairman. Quick question, one on topic, one off topic. As far as security cameras, how many of them are from the Clearview company, or how many of them have facial recognition capabilities? That's my first question. The second question is about reforms to the FOIL process. How's that going? Is there any update on that?
So Steve, no facial recognition. I don't believe any of them are from Clearview. Actually, I can say they're not from Clearview.
Okay. And as far as reforms to the FOIL process that were spoken about several years ago, the pandemic sort of moving, we're a little bit behind now. We can focus on other stuff. Is anything coming in that regard?
Yeah, I think, Tom Quigley, documents have been released pursuant to FOIL requests post-pan or in recent weeks and months. Yeah. So documents have been released. Some of you have written about it. Obviously, we've got a big backlog. The legal department hired a FOIL expert who is an experienced FOIL person who's working on it. So we've made progress, but we've got additional work to do, and it's an area of focus.
And thanks, everybody. Thank you, Jana, Pat, Bob, who never got to come, and Sarah, of course. And that is it. Good afternoon, everybody, from Lower Manhattan.